Gamers, thinkers, welcome back to Tales of Praxis. Wishing you a happy Monday. Hope you've had a great start to your week and happy to ease you into a Monday evening over here on With the Terrible Fates streaming arm. I'm your host, Aaron Suduko, the founder of With the Terrible Fate. WithTheTerribleFate.com is your home for everything to do with analyzing, studying, publishing on, and generally celebrating the storytelling of your favorite medium, video games. Tales of Praxis is a series that I've been running for With a Terrible Fate for the last half a year, specifically focused just on the wonderful Tales JRPGs of first Namco and now Bandai Namco, reading their storytelling language, trying to understand how together they have created a kind of special language all their own for telling stories in this interactive medium of video games. So we're going through all the games on stream in a kind of live book club format. I've been working through some of the others off stream and publishing articles digging as deep as you could possibly hope for and probably then some into the storytelling of these games, all available on withtheterriblefate.com. And Grail, once again you come before me, and once again I must ask you this question of how your camping trip was. No, I'm kidding. Of course, it's good to see you, my friend. I do hope that you had a great trip and that you came back with some good stories for us. You missed quite a bit. We've been enjoying and digging into everything that Act 3 of Tales of Berseria has to offer. We saw and talked to death some really amazing resolution scenes last time before heading up Mount Kilrouse for a confrontation with some exorcists in hopes of awakening 4 Empyreans in order to undo the monstrous efforts of 1. Good. I'm glad it was fun. Hopefully we can pull some more anecdotes out of you over the course of the stream. I had just a couple of thoughts to situate us on this fine Monday evening. One is just we talk about the various moments in these games and how they become sort of tropes or common touchstones within the lot of the games as a way for the players to orient themselves in the story and understand the arcs of the characters. What are typically called resolution scenes, you might also call them flaneur scenes if you got into the series through Tales of Symphonia, like me, are a great example of this. And it was so much fun to dwell on them last time. The VOD is on YouTube. But I think it's fun to take a step back too and think about the different ways in which the series has done those resolution scenes over the years, and if there are any favorites that have stuck out to you, or least favorites where you feel like you didn't quite get what they were going for, or it just didn't feel quite like what you expected. So we've already, of course, talked through the ones that we've experienced on the stream together. I'll just shout out one for my own benefit and personal background, and you'll be shocked to know that I'm starting another stream talking about Tales of the Abyss. But I was thinking as I was walking my little furry 4-legged rapide earlier today that one of the reasons I really do think Tales of the Abyss's resolution scenes are unusual in a somewhat cool way is in many JRPGs, when you have those sorts of resolution scenes, the conversations on the night before the final battle, they just kind of happen and the characters naturalistically sense, oh, we're about to do something big and significant, so we might as well have some last night on Earth conversations and talk with each other, but there's no kind of explicit context around it. One thing that I do think is cool for setting it up in Tales of the Abyss is that you might or might not recall, before the party gets ready to raid Eldrant and take the fight to Van, the colonel amongst them, Colonel Jade Curtis, actually says, I think it's Jade. Maybe it's Tyr, but I think it's Jade. He says, in the military, there's this tradition that before soldiers go off on a great battle or a tour, they have a 24-hour leave. So why don't we all take that time to collect our thoughts, take a break from all of this, think about what it is that we're doing, and then come back together for the attack against Eldrant. And I think just that kind of explicit justification and setting the tone for what the resolution scenes are, at least for me going into it, and especially with more time having passed since I played the games before, and now that I'm a little older, it's a nice added bit of context that kind of helps to ground the characters and help give us as a player the sense that they know their reasons for the time they're spending with each other, whether that's Tyr and Luke out on the ocean reflecting on life together, or Jade drinking in a bar with Annis by his side, or any of those other great moments that you get. So that's one piece of food for thought. I know, Grail, I'm sure you didn't put any money down on Aaron talking about Tales of the Abyss in the first few minutes of your return from your camping trip. I know. Well, don't worry, Grail. I mean, don't despair. There's more of the game left to go, as you know. But I will say, just for your benefit, one of the things that I've been talking about in the time since you've been gone is I had really forgotten the specifics of the third act, and really in so many of those moments that unfortunately you did miss, like Velvet's confrontation with Innominat and Laphicet and Aizen pulling her back down to earth and the earth pulse and helping her to understand what her character is all about. It's really been refreshing to me because it's occurred to me so far in the third act, and I imagine this will continue as we get into the end game. There are so many different structures you can have for a game's third act. I think part of what really pulls Tales of Berseria together in a way that isn't the case or isn't equally warranted in other Tales titles is that its first two acts, and especially its second act, take you in so many different directions. And I think probably intentionally get you to lose sight of the forest for all the trees and these different individual characters and tableaus that you're exploring. And then the third act does a remarkable job of tying all those different bits and pieces from across the story together in a way that really does create some keen and cool insights that really do resonate more tightly than you might expect from a game that has so much going on. Like I remember dwelling on that when we finally caught up with Eifried and fought him. Something like that so easily could be a distraction or a side quest in another game really ended up feeling like a supplemental or secondary main quest, especially in the way that it comes to fruition and what that says not only about Aizen and Zavid, but also how it cascades through to the rest of the party in this world. So we've had a lot of moments like that, but don't worry, the VODs are all up. I would encourage especially you, Grail, to check them out if you haven't, because there are some cool conversations and I'd love to get your take on them and have you join the fray. But there are plenty more fun moments yet to come. The one other kind of fun thing, I'll say for your benefit, Grail, I mentioned this last time, but as we're getting into the end game of Berseria, I also got some nice special edition concert pins of, you probably can't tell from this distance, but we have Velvet on a violin and Magilou on a flute. So they're contributing to the orchestra of their own game's final act, which is a nice Very With a Terrible Fate vibe to be getting into this with. And then I'll also say, as I'm continuing to expand my Tales collection as Tales of Praxis goes on, in anticipation of a game that we have talked a lot about but have not played together yet, had to go all the way to Australia for this copy of Tales of Grace's F. Not a collector's edition per se, but a premium edition, which I'm really excited to check out because it has kind of an unusual thing in it, a making of DVD. So I'm not even sure what kind of content is contained in that, but excited to check it out. Also love it because just since we've taken the time on the past streams to talk about the difference in cover art and how that can set the tone for a game, I mean, both artworks, I would say, really great for a beautiful game that I love so much. But if you look at the one that I, at least in the States, was familiar with, it's really just a portrait of all of the characters from the party in the game. And there's not too much of a rhyme or reason to it. Whereas without going into spoilers for Tales of Graces, if you look at the way just this portraiture is set up, yeah, you still have all of the characters, but there's a clear division between them that says a lot about the game if you know what it's about. And then in the background, there's actually this interesting intersection or clash between these two spheres. You might even say two worlds that you don't get any allusion to on the other box. So I did quite enjoy that in terms of just getting another perspective on not just the game, but also in terms of how it's represented artistically on the cover Onward. Yeah, it would be really interesting, Grail, to do like just a comparative study of the different act structures in the different games. That's one of the things that I've really been enjoying going into in the article I'm working on Destiny and Vesperia, which, by the way, I'll say is my last update. I'm probably about halfway through my draft, maybe a little more than that. So it's coming. I'm hoping end of September, but I'll keep you all posted. But it's been a romp, and I think you'll all really enjoy it. But their act structures are remarkably similar, but there is a lot of diversity across the different games in terms of the pacing of their stories in a way that is easy to overlook unless you're playing them one right after the other. I'll say, yeah, it's interesting, Grail. I mean, I get the feeling like you're talking about, that it feels relatively short, but also I'll say, especially when I've been living in Vesperia and Destiny, like those are very short and basically just have one thing to say, more or less, as a kind of coda or just final resolution of things that were dealt with and presented earlier in the games. Whereas here, like I've been surprised, because I figured, and this was kind of what I was foregrounding to you before you left, I was worried, like the game was crescendoing so fast, I really didn't know if there would be any content left by the time that you got back. And there have been a lot more threads and a lot more just unwinding of character relationships, not only how the characters see themselves, but also what they see in each other in a really rewarding and cool way in the third act. So I definitely think it's tight. There's no fat on the bones, it's just meat. But I think it does a good service to all of the players who are involved, not just the ones that are on the pause screen, which I guess we can switch to. I realize I'm still in my conversation window, but not just in terms of the characters you see here, but also in terms of the supplemental characters we've had a really fun time diving into. That's been Ifrit or Melchior, or anyone else in the mix. The other Therians, in fact, right? We've spent a good amount of time diving back into Dial and Medissa, and thinking about Kurogane, especially while I'm working on this article to do with sentient swords. And now our boy Kurogane is a sword. So all that to say, definitely short in some senses, but there's been plenty to dive into and enjoy, and I know we will we'll continue to enjoy it together. I guess if I don't know, I don't know, because even living inside of Vesperia in the series, I'm not totally sure what you're alluding to with that comment, Crail. Maybe you can enlighten me. Oh, you're talking about the summon spirits. Well, no, that's one of the things that I think is cool about Tales of the Abyss. I mean, it's not especially central to the world's cosmology, but it's not even the months that are named after the summon spirits. It's the collective sentience of the different elements of phonons. Like Rem is the collective sentience of light, and also like the summon spirit of light. So not called Luna, but you still get that continuity of there's some place in the world order for that idea of spirits. So yes, I do know what you're talking about now. Well, I'll be interested in your take on my article then, because I know what you're saying, riffing about Vesperia, but my hope is also, as I think I've said before with this article, like I hope people find a lot of things to get out of it. I think one thing that I've gotten out of it that will hopefully be worthwhile is I think those are both games in which the third acts can feel somewhat shoehorned or contrived or like afterthoughts, which is another way of saying what I was saying before when I said they feel short. But I think seen in the right light in terms of the themes that are being wrestled with, not just before it, but across the whole game, you can come to appreciate that it's not as much of a deus ex machina as I know some people feel about it. With all of that in mind, let's check up on our expedition and get back to the very important work of climbing a volcano. Kurogane.
It worked! Huge success!
This is fun because, as you know, I recently replayed Tales of Arise in order to be able to put together some thoughts on it for the lecture I did at PAX West. And I had the experience of, you go through the EX dungeon and you wander through these homages to the worlds of different games. And when you get to the Berseria world, it takes place on Mount Kilorous, but I hadn't played Berseria recently enough to remember why there was a volcano in that world or what it was that the actual heroes were doing when they got there. So now I'm in this funny position of coming back to Berseria and saying, oh yeah, Mount Killerhouse, that's familiar to me from the EX dungeon from the game after it that was alluding to it. So it's kind of like a little causal back reaction in terms of how I'm experiencing it, which is fun.
Don't get overconfident.
It is interesting that you mentioned the Summon Spirits Grail, because one thing that I've thought about sitting down and writing on before, and I still might at some point, is just thinking about all the different games that do involve Summon Spirits in one way or another, and kind of comparing and contrasting what it is that they have to say, or just evaluating whether they're always used as the same kind of narrative device. Because they are, I mean, obviously, just as much as the spirits are in Final Fantasy or many other JRPG series, they show up over and over again in these games. But I think like a lot of narrative elements, even like magic swords, right, which is part of what I'm looking at in this article on Vesperia and Destiny, like the tropes come up again and again, but, you know, just like various party dynamics or other elements of the game's storytelling, they're used for different purposes in the different games. And I think it can be fun, especially for something with just so much source material like Summon Spirits, and not just Summon Spirits coming up in different worlds, but Summon Spirits coming up in different ways in the same world, like Fantasia versus Symphonia versus Dawn of the New World. It could be really fun to compare and contrast them.
It appears that we're finished here.
Yeah, I feel you, Grail. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that I love the Tales game so much, and it's part of what I'm trying to wrestle with in Tales of Praxis, and I imagine it'll probably be a big part of Xillia as well when we finally get around to doing Xillia, because like we've talked about on the stream before, there's definitely a type of storytelling that's common in fantasy games and JRPGs and sometimes sci-fi, where they can just be real. I think it was Pottery who talked about it as being just really jargon heavy, and introducing a lot of like pseudo-scientific or fantasy concepts to explain the structure of the world. And sometimes you can feel like, yeah, maybe a world was really thoroughly built out, like, you know, a Tolkien-style fantasy world with, you know, 3 different languages and all of these complex layers of magical explanation, but it doesn't really do much in terms of like creating storytelling value or interacting with the themes that the narrative is wrestling with at all. I feel like Tales is the poster child for doing that very well, with not only explaining the worlds in the way that you're talking about, but then also taking it a step further and saying, yeah, it's not just that there are these really robust and complicated dynamics of phonons and gravity and, you know, the relationship between different layers of world and the core and all of this stuff in Tales of the Abyss. But actually, if you trace the role that all of those concepts play in the plot and how they manifest in the different characters and what they're wrestling with, it can actually give you a totally different and more robust grasp of the themes too.
Cold. Getting sleep.
Which I think is like really foundational to how games or stories are able to achieve what I oftentimes talk about as a particularly holistic style of storytelling, where everything in the world and fictional object bends towards the expression of a particular set of themes. And I really love that kind of storytelling, especially in video games, and this is why I analyze games in the way that I do. If you have looked at or read my written work, you know this is how I think about things. Like, I love games that wrap together the overall experience thematically, because I think especially in an interactive medium where you spend so long with these things and your journeys can take you on so many literal side quests and in different routes that seemingly have nothing to do with stuff like the main plot, it can be really hard to step back and make total sense of the time you spent with the game in terms of it all adding up to something, unless the game is holistic in this way that I'm talking about, such that no matter what you ended up doing with it or what you ended up spending your time on, it can all contribute to the same narrative expression of particular messages and themes at the end of the day. I think that's really crucial to video game storytelling, and I think Tales games do it in a really magical and cool way. I also, Grail, I'll tell you this because you'll roll your eyes and laugh, because I think my Tales of the Abyss study is so daunting that you probably still haven't read it. I realized last week while I was working on this other article of mine that I'm probably going to have to go back and add like some kind of postscript or an amendment to the article and make it even longer. Or maybe I'll add a comment or, make it a shorter follow-up article or something, because it's so funny how ideas or concepts show up for us in the world. But so I've been working through this article on Destiny and Vesperia, and I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm trying to get in a work grind, I'll put on a show that I'm familiar with just as white noise in the background. And I use it as a good excuse to rewatch shows that I haven't seen in a long time and see if I have a different perspective on them now. So I've been doing that with Supernatural. I might have mentioned this already on the stream, but it's one that a girlfriend of mine actually got me into in high school, and I kind of made the mistake of getting hooked for all pretty uneven 15 seasons of it. So I've seen it all the way through before, and I figured, I'm older now, I have a different perspective on storytelling. I'll sit down and see how it holds up. So I'm working through that as I'm working on this article. And I got to this episode that actually centers on Nazi necromancers. And because it's supernatural, they bring in a lot of, as you might imagine, like supernatural and esoteric lore from whatever traditions they're playing with. And so the whole plot of this episode is Nazi necromancers versus basically a group of mystic rabbis who have been fighting them over the years. And the centerpiece of that is a golem. And even if you've just played the Tales games, you know that golems are these like animated rock beings, but they actually are also mythical creatures with a lot of lore in specifically the Jewish tradition, being these like clay constructs which rabbis are able to mystically breathe life into, to, among other things, defend the Jewish people in times of crisis. And so it was something that hadn't come up in my research at all, and I stopped working on my Vesperia and Destiny article, and I looked at Evie and I said to her, "Man, are you telling me I wrote a whole fucking treatise on Jewish mysticism in Tales of the Abyss, and I said nothing about the connection between golems and replicas?" So I don't think it changes the substance of anything that I said so much as just adding another really cool and totally warranted layer to it. But I'll probably go back and add a bit of commentary on that, because, I mean, once you see that, you're not going to unsee that aspect of the game. And just, goes to show the amount of, like, nuance and justified sophistication, to the point that you raised, Grail, that the creators of these games give to their worlds and the relationship between the worlds and whatever source text they might be working with. I think the comparison one wants is that by the end of Tales of Praxis, the Tales of Abyss article will be as long as all of like the Talmud and all of the other like Kabbalistic texts on the Jewish faith, because that itself is like it's like tomes upon tomes of commentary and like rabbinical teachings and everything else. So it's probably sacrilegious of me to say that. If there are any actual people of the Jewish faith who find this stream, I apologize. I do this work out of immense respect for the source materials and all of the insights and contributions that I really do think games like Tales of the Abyss are able to make to it. So please don't take offense. I'm just trying to celebrate it and introduce more people to the ideas. Yeah, Grail, buckle up, because this Vesperia and Destiny one, as you might have guessed by the amount of time I've been working on it, will also be a mammoth, but hopefully it will be a more accessible and fun mammoth, because it's not really bringing in any sort of like outside intellectual traditions. It's much more focused on the idea of, okay, what does it mean to be an agent and act based on your own will? How can we think about the different swords in these games as symbolic models for that? And then how can we trace those models across the 3 acts to show how characters who are transparently very lost at the beginning of the game are able to affect not only their own individual wills, but also the entire course of the world's future in a very empowering, ground-up way by the end of the game. And I think just studying that across the 2 games going to be a lot of fun. It should be pretty easy to read, with respect to either game if you want to focus on Tales of Destiny or Tales of Vesperia, but the hope is I don't want to say it's going to be my last word on either game, because as you know, I could say so much about any game in the Tales series, and there's so much to be said about any game in the series, but it definitely feels like more than I was planning at the outset of this work. It's definitely going to be like a fully polished take on the entirety of both of the games. So, which should also be fun, because it occurred to me, since I already published that work on Tales of the Abyss, it's also like, this is the, I think I went in a circle because I wasn't paying attention to where I was going. Yeah, that's right. The Tales of Praxis Bible. Exactly. I did go in a circle. I wasn't paying enough attention. But to finish that last thought, so it occurred to me that because I already wrote on Tales of the Abyss, now after I've published on Vesperia and Destiny, I'll have caught up with writing on all of the games that I haven't streamed. So hopefully that'll be a fun way of bringing, the stream gang and the real life JRPG party in on the adventures that I've had off of the stream. And will be a nice jumping off point for publishing some stuff on the other games that I have streamed, and going on some new streaming adventures after this, which we still have to decide what we're doing next. We're coming up on the conclusion of Berseria, so we got to make a choice at some point. Yeah, no doubt, Grail, and I still have to figure out, whether and how there's a way for me to play a good translation of the sequel, but definitely with something that is so direct a sequel. I mean, even my folk understanding of it is, it's not really the kind of game that you can talk about divorced from Tales of Destiny. Which is itself an interesting thing to think about in terms of, again, the series as a whole, because I think you certainly could talk about Tales of Berseria in a vacuum outside of Vesperia, and it would be harder with Dawn of the New World, but I think you could pull it off too. And actually, that's kind of something that I'm thinking I might do after I publish this article on Destiny and Vesperia, because Grail, this is hilarious. Did we talk about how you left and then literally the next day we got the announcement about Beyond the Dawn? So talk about you having terrible timing. You should go back and watch the VODs, because I also dropped a bunch of my thoughts and just excitement about that. But to keep a long story short, one of the reasons I'm thinking I might go back to Dawn of the New World is because I think, based on the very small amount we've seen and that they've said about Beyond the Dawn so far, it might be really interesting to have a clear model in our mind of what they did with Emil and Ratatosk and that particular synthesis of different ideas and personalities before we go into Beyond the Dawn and see something that might be interestingly similar yet distinct in the character of Nazimil. So I have a few ideas for things that I will probably try to work on in quick succession after this longer article. One being a write-up of the Tales of Arise content that I did for the PAX West lecture, and then one also maybe being something that's more self-contained, since I already wrote a bit about Dawn of the New World, specifically in the context of Tales of Symphonia in my article on Regal, and now I almost want to flip it, reverse it, and say, okay, let's write something shorter that just treats Dawn of the New World as a story unto itself, and what is it trying to express in terms of specifically the player's journey with Ratatosk, because I think there's a lot of interesting substance there. Oh, Grail, I'm sorry you're not hype. I'll say I'm very hype. I think, especially in the context of Tales of Praxis and a lot of the work we've been doing, not just working through the games, but also thinking about some of the really interesting questions around game follow-up content, whether that's a DLC or a sequel or a prequel or a spiritual successor, all of which have really great examples and food for thought in the Tales series. I think it'll be a really fun lens through which to dig into Beyond the Dawn, so I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But I'll try to get your spirits hyped up before it drops in November. How about that? And hey, I'm telling you, Grail, I know this is the old drum that I've been beating, but I don't know what the timing will be, but I really feel like the winds and tides are right for Bamco to definitely push those games that were never officially localized to the West. It feels totally in line with the stuff they're trying to do as a company and kind of getting people excited about their existing IPs, and breathing new life into old content, even in terms of what they did with Symphonia Remastered. So I would not be surprised if we got our wish for some of those other games in the next few years. Probably nowhere near as soon as we would want it, but I would be shocked if it weren't on their roadmap as a company.
Good luck out there. Don't come back empty-handed.
Why Stan's outfit, Grail? I almost feel like maybe this is too obvious for them to bother doing, but I feel like Elfin in a Lloyd outfit would make a lot of sense in terms of the thematic continuity between characters, which they seem to be doing a pretty good job with all of the other character outfits. I feel like you can draw a thematic thread between most of them. Pottery and I spent a little bit of time wrestling with, okay, is Velvet's outfit really a thematic tie-in for Shion? But I at least walked away from it feeling like, yes, it is. It's one that encourages you to think about the relationship between their characters for a few minutes, because I didn't get it right away. But I think once you step back and think about the various ways in which they're both imprisoned and overcome those prisons, there's actually a decent amount of overlap there.
We'll be facing Shigure soon.
Yeah, not long now. I know this is a weird time to bring this up, Laphicet, but there's something I've been meaning to ask you.
All right, ask away.
I knew you'd say that.
Boo! No, I disagree with you, Grail. I mean, obviously they're both fire boys who use fire, but Lloyd and Alphen are both people who unite worlds. I mean, come on. That strikes me as much more significant and interesting than just being fire boys. I guess there are many different dimensions along which characters can be similar or different. So to each their own. I recognize that, but also, come on. Yeah, and obviously I'm not in a position to argue the comparative similarity between Xillia 2's protagonist and Destiny's. So I will take you at your word there for now, but be warned, once we get caught up with the Xillia games, I will probably be more than happy to renew the debate at that point.
So, how was your bath in Melchior?
Huh?
You went in with Velvet, right? Just between us guys. What was it like?
What are you getting at, Rokurou?
Dude, I'm like a kid and kind of her brother.
It'll be our secret.
Not you too, Isaac!
Boys, please.
There's nothing to be ashamed of. There are just certain times in life when you need to find your resolve and seize the opportunity. We just want to know what your resolve is.
Get behind your own wheel, off, he
Take a
said.
test. Well, that's a shame. That might have been your one shot. Once you're all grown up, you won't be able to get away with it.
That's why I didn't do it. I'm tired of Velvet treating me like a little kid.
Bravo!
You passed the test.
Right. You don't need me to watch out.
Aha, skillful means,
Why did you
baby.
laugh like that?
We're just happy that you're growing up.
I don't understand you two. If you're just gonna pick on me, go away.
We're sorry, but I really needed that. Laughter's good for the soul.
Rokurou, were you feeling tense?
You wouldn't think it, huh? But now I can fight like I always do. I owe you, Laphicet.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Looks like the next test is yours.
Yeah. Laphicet, Aizen. Watch me prove
Oh,
myself.
Rokurou, buddy. I'm rooting for you. Grail, I almost feel like we need to do a stream playthrough of Tales of Arise just so I can get in your head more about the way that you feel about its gameplay. Because, man, I think sometimes we're just looking for different things from gameplay. Because replaying it, especially replaying it during, I think that was the time when I was still working through Zestiria and contrasting their modes of gameplay. Like, I have so much love for the gameplay of Arise, and especially in terms of typically piloting swordsmen. Like, Alphen feels super fluid to me. I understand the way he works. It makes sense. It's very fun and dynamic to me. So I feel like we're looking for different things from our idealized gameplay. Although I will say it would be very fun to see a modern standards Tales JRPG come out with the gameplay of a magical sword that enables spellcasting, like the Swordians. That I would love to play a game like that in whatever kind of world they wanted to make it in, whether it was a Destiny remake or a new kind of world.
How do you think Shigure will move against us?
He's not really the imaginative type. He'll be out in the open, waiting for us.
I'm ready for this.
Yeah, no, and totally fair, Grail. I mean, that's part of why I'm saying maybe we should just play it, because I'd like to get more in your head in terms of what the personal hang-up is. I want to analyze you. Oh, that's interesting. So it just struck you as too much of a departure from the Tales series in terms of the elements of the games that you really resonate with. Is that what you mean?
I'll cut down anyone in my way.
No, I think I totally get what you mean, Grail. I'll also say, like, I think it's a very different thing to be playing through Tales of Arise in the context of Tales of Praxis, playing all these games one right after the other and saying, okay, let's see what this game has to say versus all of the other ones, versus, you know, it's 2021, you haven't had a new Tales game in, what, 3 or 4 years at that point? You have your first new Mothership title, and it's Tales of Arise, and it feels very different than the other ones. I can totally see how, you know, especially playing through that and expecting something that feels like a familiar friend after Berseria and getting something like Arise instead. I could conceive of that being a disappointment for sure.
It's the perfect place for a flanking attack.
We don't need to worry about management. Shigure is waiting for us up there.
I think that's literally the first time on this stream that I've triggered her second tier Mystic card. I like it though. Worth the wait. Was it a Volron line? I didn't even... It's such a generic sounding Volron line. I'm not ashamed for not having made that when you first say it.
We're finished.
But yes, I can picture that exact moment now that you mention it's his.
Here I come.
Are you in the camp, Grail, that you assume Nazumil is Volron's daughter? Because that's the camp that I'm in. I was saying when the trailer first came out, I was a little disappointed because before I watched the trailer and I just read the announcement, I was saying to my dear friend and colleague, Dan Hughes, whom I'm sure you dearly missed, Grail, man, I feel like it's probably Volron, but wouldn't it be interesting to explore like a mother-daughter relationship if Nazumil was Almadria's kid? And then I watched the trailer and, of course, Alphen says, yeah, she's the daughter, or no, I think the way he phrases it is a Renan Lord is her father. So then, of course, it's not going to be Almadria, which I was like, oh, I didn't seriously think that, but now I don't get to have fun playing around with that in my head for the next couple months. Oh, Grail, it's funny that you say that because, well, watch the VODs, although I forget how much I really went into this. My take on it was actually the exact opposite of that. I think back to everything that I was saying while I was playing through Tales of Arise in terms of how, like, dark the subtext is, I think, during the period when Volron kidnaps Shion and how he might or might not have interfered with her. Like, I think it's almost the darkest possibility for Volron to be the daughter of Nazumil, because I think there are a lot of ways in which that could have been engineered either by Volron or even by the Renan homeworld that had nothing to do with love. Which to me would explain a lot of why that kid seems so just broken and incapable of understanding certain truths about the unity of different persons in the bits of the trailer that we saw. Stepdad Alphen! Now that is, I wouldn't say that's a game I would play, but that's like a like an animated short that I would watch. Alphen the stepdad. He kind of feels like a stepbrother or like something between a surrogate brother and dad to Law, so I feel like he could pull it off in a wholesome way. Yeah, speaking of Arise, it's like you dipped out for all of the rising action of the narrative, and then we're just going to be crashing down for the next few streams. So I guess depending on what you're looking for out of the stream, this is either a great or a terrible time to come back relative to what you missed. But plenty of good stuff ahead, like I was saying. Man, I'll tell you, though, there have been so many great little character moments, and I know we talk all the time on the stream, you and I and everyone else, about how great Tales is for these little character portraits. That's one of the things that I've really been loving, too, about working through this article for Vesperia and Destiny, which I think is part of why it's taken so long, is, it took forever to figure out the right way to line the two games up in terms of how to be able to see something that they're both saying in conversation with one another that's more valuable than just playing through the games on their own terms. But then once you have that framework, it's like, for me at least, so much of the joy of working through it is using that to stop and dwell on like little heartbreaking moments, like everything that goes down between Ruti and Leon. And oh my God, like, I know we've kind of talked around this before, Grail, but it's really interesting to me how even in those much earliest, in fact, Tales games, where they have so many like fewer technical capabilities to work with and mostly just express relationships in a few lines of text at a time, like those relationships say so much in so few moments, and in some ways say a lot more than much more like technically developed and longer games say nowadays. So, I mean, hats off to the Tales series, but it's been really fun to sit with and think about those, and hopefully people will walk away from reading this article with a new perspective on them too, which is one of my hopes. I'm going to save again because ever since that remastered playthrough, I'm an anxious bastard about it. Oh my god, yeah, talk about being on brand, Grail. Maybe even more so than Skull Kid in Majora's Mask, poor Leon is the poster boy for meeting with a terrible fate. All my boys are sad. All my boys love stories. It's with a terrible fate. We're gaming and crying. If we ever need a theme song for the stream, there's something there, left as an exercise to the reader.
Wow, really? He's really just waiting for us here?
My man! Rokurou was drinking sake the night before. Shigure moments before. Oh, are they gonna drink together? That would be really cool. Yeah! Oh, that's so touching. Speaking of really perfect character moments.
Incredible! The old bastard forged himself into a sword.
Indeed. That blade's the embodiment of Kurogane's centuries of study.
The Kurogane Stormquell. I like it.
Just Kurogane for now. He will be the blade that surpasses both Stormquell and Storm.
Wow.
And when it does, then he will have earned the name Kurogane Storm.
It really is something of a little portrait of the forging of a swordian, absent all of the background context of the Aether Wars. Yeah, I agree with you, Grail. It feels kind of analogous to the Shina Kuchinawa fight in Tales of Symphonia. But they also already had their one-on-one duel. Although, I mean, especially with that one-on-one duel, having this be one-on-one would be nice parallelism to that. But, you know, also think about this following right on the back of the resolution scenes, and they're there for a bigger purpose than the duel, which they've all gotten behind. So it kind of feels like a nice even moment of growth for Rokurou, right? Where initially, when he was just wrapped up in his own head and didn't know the party that well, he felt like this was something he had to do on his own. Now it's something where the party can honor his intentions and reasons for fighting his brother, but they can also support him with it, and he's willing to accept that support. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I do feel like, especially with the sort of like the language of boss fights that we've seen come about even in the last few years, like if Tales of Berseria were released now, I can easily imagine this being sort of a two-step boss fight with maybe either Rokurou fighting him one-on-one and then everyone else joins the fray, or even vice versa. Like it starts out as a group thing and then there's a point at which it becomes just about their honor more than anything else and they have to fight one-on-one. That would be cool to reimagine. What would this look like in a different boss fight format, and what would that say about the characters?
Watch out. I wouldn't be surprised if he used an Armatus.
An Armatus? It's not my style to rely on anyone's help.
Says the big bad exorcist. Look, you'll even ask a tubby kitty for help.
Shut up, I'm totally not.
He isn't. Quite the opposite, actually. Shigure asked me to restrain his power.
Restrain his power? Wait, you don't mean...
She does. It's for my training. At first, I could barely even move my little finger. Morgrim, release my bindings.
Oh! I have a secret. I'm not actually left-handed.
Can a human even be this strong?
enough will, humans can do anything. This was to be my secret weapon against Artorias. I'm impressed.
Rokurou!
Sorry, but we're pitching in.
Good. I'll take you all at once.
Velvet also does insist, which makes it a little more believable.
You won't kill me unless you use everything you've got. I know. All too well.
Oh man, I love this battle track too.
Some fun. You got it. Round 1013. Seriously, you're still counting only because they were all lost. But that ends today.
Oh, interesting, Grail. I can kind of hear that now that you say it, yeah. There are so many great riffs on themes in Tales games. Could do a whole musical study of that too. I probably couldn't. Music isn't that much in my wheelhouse. I just sit back and love it, but someone with a little bit of music theory could say some really cool things about it. It's also cool because now, of course, my Tales of Destiny soaked mind is just thinking more about Kurogane in the context of the Swordians, because Grail, you weren't here for the resolution scenes, but one of the really cool aspects of that is we don't actually get to see Kurogane deciding to become a sword. Like when we go to talk to Rokurou, Kurogane has already sealed himself away in the forge, and Rokurou is left to tell us, yeah, he made the decision to turn himself into a sword. And for those who have played Tales of Destiny, I'm not going to talk over this. Awesome.
What do you know? I totally agree.
But so what I was saying was, one of the elements of the Swordians in Tales of Destiny is that they can only be heard by the Swordian masters and other people who aren't chosen and don't have the ability to resonate with the swords aren't able to hear their voices. And so I think even there's like a fun, heartfelt parallelism with how it is that Kurogane makes himself into a sword, where he recognizes that Rokurou would be the only one who could understand that, and so he's the rightful person to wield that sword and wield Kurogane's intentions and help him achieve his dream. And so also he would be the only one who is capable of hearing Kurogane's intentions and voice. It's a mystic practice, Grail. The likes of us could never understand. It's like the snake that eats itself, if you know what I mean.
You people are really something, aren't you?
Don't act like you're impressed. I haven't even shown you my true blade.
Your true blade?
Yeah, it's another great thing that the Tales games do so well, right? It kind of reminds me of sort of an inversion of what happens with Ein Sof Aur in Dawn of the New World, if you have the sheer idiocy of trying to use that against Richter, and he counters with Eternal Recurrence. Feels very similar to that.
Well then, no time for me to take a break.
Shigure!
Keep out of this one, Morgrim.
Rokurou, he's still got plenty of power left.
Of course he does. He's Shigure Rangetsu after all.
2 blades, you sure?
Why don't you find out? It's your life on the line.
The same goes for you.
You're wide open!
3 of them. So this is your true
That's
blade.
awesome.
That's right. I developed this technique to defeat you.
Yeah, I know that feeling, Grail.
Not bad at all. This is my parting gift to Kurogane. Take Stormhowl. One last thing. Please let this fat cat go.
Go. Fat cat, I love you.
Shigure, you were ordered to be executed because I
was already planning on leaving. I was sick of living the life of a chained dog. Idiot. Stop worrying about the little things. Rejoice when your blade finds its mark. Seethe when it doesn't. Die when one finds you. That's all there is to it. The way of the sword is a simple one. That's what makes it so much fun.
Yeah, it really is.
That's the vicious face I'm looking for. If only Artorias' stony face could smile like that, he'd be a lot happier.
I mean, especially given what you just said, Grail, not only talking about the Dark Souls ethos more broadly, but you could probably say that exact very sad thing about Artorias in Dark Souls too.
Yeah. Velvet,
We're good.
we're good. My blade found its mark.
Man, that was so great. I had 2 quick thoughts. One was I was thinking more about the structure of the fight and how that related to the much earlier one-on-one duel that really kind of kicked off Act 2 of the game, if you remember. And I do think, like we were playing around with Grail, there are a million different ways you could structure this battle and confrontation to bring out different aspects of Rokurou's character and Shigure's and the whole party. One thing that I do think is kind of cool about having the duel that Shigure and Rokurou do have embedded in a cutscene is I think there's an interesting sense in which, like, at the beginning, when he first duels with Shigure and just gets absolutely wasted, he's trying to will himself to do it. He doesn't have the resolve, and he needs all the help that he can get, including the guidance of the player actually, making the decisions in battle for him. And then especially with that as the starting point, to have the finale and his resolution against Shigure be, him taking total control and total agency and saying, this is something that I've trained myself to do, and not even the player can do this for me. This is just me with this hidden technique that I've developed for this one moment. I do think there's something that's kind of resonant and touching about that, not just from a narrative perspective, but in terms of how the gameplay or lack of gameplay in this case contributes to Rokurou's overall arc and resolve. The other thought was, I just had it. Is it going to come back to me? Oh, yeah. The other thought was kind of cool, and another very Tales thing, how, as we know from the side quest that Grail led us on quite a while ago, the first confrontation between Rokurou and Shigure that turned Rokurou into a demon was Rokurou being ordered by the clan to assassinate his brother who didn't want to be a part of the clan anymore. And so for that first fight to be Rokurou trying and failing to kill his brother because of the orders of someone else, and then for the final confrontation between them where Rokurou finally overcomes it to be fighting purely on his own terms for his own reasons, that's a really nice kind of parallelism of structure to show Rokurou's growth as a person and how he's come to understand not just himself, but also his relationship with his brother in a totally different way.
Our scout ship has returned.
Yeah, I loved that battle in those scenes as well, Grail. I'm glad we were able to go through that together.
This one gets it style, guys.
Swordian Peninsula! Oh man, talk about the perfect time in the game to unlock that area for expedition. I love that. Oh, sometimes coincidences just work out in the most narratively touching ways. Home to a once flourishing civilization that worshipped the goddess Atimony. While Atimony is said to have had a large impact on Malakim culture, little else is known about her. Interesting that they would draw a comparison between the Malakim and Atimony. I'll be mulling that as we continue.
Scout ship setting sail.
Let's see if we can salvage the Eye of Atimony from the ocean and have an existential crisis about it. That'll be our next goal. Is it shaped like a sword? I didn't even stop to look at that. Yeah, I can kind of see it. What, like the left side is the blade and the right side is the hilt? I feel like you have to want to see it. But now that you say it looks like a sword, I mean, I can't unsee it. Oh no, I did get that one actually, Grail. I had a whole extended freak out about it on the last stream because with what it says about space-time manipulation in the region, I put my tinfoil hat on and started thinking, wait, is this region in the optional expedition map the explanation for why this world is able to pull in all of this stuff from seemingly unrelated parallel worlds of other games? So I think there's more to think about there than any sane person should put before himself for consideration. Yeah, no, and also, Grail, just to catch up on your other comment, I think it's perfectly reasonable to hold that up as the benchmark of coolness for the ritual defeat of your family in a video game. Are we looking for things other than that out of life? Because if so, I feel as though we're probably doing life wrong.
I won't stop you.
Don't forget, my purpose here is to repay my debt to you. What's the matter? Why are you crying?
I'm not crying.
She was crying.
Okay.
Okay? Is that all you have to say?
What's wrong? You really are crying.
You and Shigure. Your brothers, but...
Oh, that. It's really nothing to shed tears over.
How can you pretend it's not important? Don't tell me it's because you're a demon.
You went and answered your own question.
So you will say it's because you're a demon.
No, that's not the answer, actually. It's not because I'm a demon. It's because we're swordsmen that I'm not sad.
Huh?
When we fought, when we both really fought, I got this sharp, vivid feeling that pierced straight to my core. When we were both throwing ourselves wholly into the battle, we wanted to keep on fighting forever, like an unquenchable thirst. That's a feeling we only got from each other.
Lord Shigure did seem to be enjoying himself. I feel like I can understand it a little better now. But I'll never comprehend it.
That's for the better. If you did, you'd end up like us.
Probably so.
I wonder when I'll be able to have a match like that again.
You won't have to worry about that. Just as you worked so hard to defeat Lord Shigure, another swordsman will do the same to defeat you.
You're not wrong. Your positivity reminds me of him. Now I'm suddenly craving a cup of Yozakura Anmitsu.
Yozakura Anmitsu?
cherry blossom flavored sweet bean paste, black sesame ice cream, and fruit. It was Shigure's favorite.
That's kind of hard to picture, but I'd like to try it.
Let's settle then. When this is all over, I'll take you out for some.
I look forward to that.
Then make sure you come back alive, alright?
You too, Rokurou. Yozokura Anmitsu. I won't forget.
I love that skit. I'm sure they could also have done a touching version of this where Rokurou did cry for his brother afterwards, but I feel like one of the reasons that I really like how he seems to be totally back to normal and not fazed by it after all is said and done is it strikes me as a really believable outcome of how he really did just resolve and gear his entire life towards understanding what his rivalry with his brother meant and why he wanted to overcome him, so that by the time the moment came, all that was left was the act itself, and the emotions and the meaning of it were all just foregone conclusions. So it's like there's nothing for him to be processing or undergoing catharsis about now, because just in the act of forging the sword, Kurogane, and developing the technique, he had already worked through everything that he needed to with respect to his brother.
You should get out of here while you still have the chance.
If things get hairy, I'll run. But please, let me stay here a little longer. I owe Shigure for giving me back my free will. And he always did hate
Yeah, there's no doubt about that, Grail.
I never knew that.
Demon Rokurou definitely has game.
Weren't you his
Let's call a spade a
brother?
spade.
We never had time to think about anything other than our training.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean any insult. He lived and he died according to his own beliefs. That has to be good enough. Humans like that are not so bad.
I suppose we aren't.
You're a funny sort of Moloch, aren't you?
Thanks for the compliment.
That's so funny. That little optional dialogue is just a perfect little microcosm of the why is it that birds fly motif. Shigure told Morgrim that cats are fickle because that's what cats are. Essentialist explanation at its finest. We'll probably have occasion to go more into the philosophy of that as we get further into the conclusion here. I'm sure it'll come up in more ways than one. Despise what particular slang, Grail? Slang that they used in the game? Is there something else to do here? Oh, we probably have to have a conversation by Stormhowl. I'm glad I didn't miss that.
Rokurou, you said something to him at the end.
To Shigure?
Yeah, maybe it's not my place to ask, but
I don't mind. It was just something that happened long ago. The story about Shigure plotting to overthrow our lord. That was a lie. A lie that I spread.
Oh, wow.
I wanted a just cause to strike him down. Stormhowl, Shigure's name, the leadership of the clan. I used to want all of that.
I take back what Aaron said about the relationship 5 minutes ago.
Not at all. Besides, Shigure figured it out a long time ago. But really, I don't know what made me think I had the strength to defeat him back then.
he was truly strong.
Of course he was. He was the head of the Rangetsu family, the strongest warriors in all the land.
Rokurou, does this make you head of the clan now?
No. I'm a demon. And more importantly, all I ever wanted was to beat my brother. That's enough for me.
That's touching too, though. I mean, seen through that light, it's like Rokurou came to understand over the years what his ambition was really about, because I read that as him saying he mistakenly felt like he had this ambition to become leader of the clan when really what was important all along was being recognized by his brother. And it's like it took him corrupting through malevolence, which again is a lack of consonance or understanding between what's important to you and what you do, and wrestling with all that malevolence over the years and with the party in order to understand what was really true to him and what he had been pursuing all along. So I like that. That seems more of a piece with the rest of the game. Yeah, no, I appreciate the push, Grail. That absolutely changed it for me. Did you ever look up if there are other side quests like that? I know there's the one for the Norndals that we haven't completed yet, so what I was figuring was we could kind of get to the very end and then do some housekeeping for side quests, but I wasn't sure yet what else to be looking for besides just going around the world again. Oh, Riz, that's the slang you were talking about. Yeah, I'll be completely transparent with you, my friend. Your comment was actually the first time that I've ever heard that in my entire life, so I had to pause to look it up quickly so I knew what the hell you were talking about. So, I don't feel especially enriched by having that in my vocabulary now, so I think you and I are agreed on its comparative value. And here we are. That area from EX Dungeon in other game.
It's scorching. No, it's torrid. Wait, no, it's hot! Can you please stop making a fuss?
Well, it's not too late to start again, my friend.
People inside a volcano needs their head examined.
I can feel the power of the earth pulse flowing upward. This is the life spring.
That's odd. Melchior isn't here.
Have you devoured even Shigure, Lord of Calamity?
Melchior was here.
But remember, the only exorcists whose souls are worthy of sacrifice are Shigure, Oscar, Teresa, and me!
He's above us, at the volcano's peak.
God, speaking of great voice acting, I don't think we've called out Melchior specifically yet, but kills this role.
Innominat's power. If you are missing even one, awakening them will cause this volcano to explode.
He's booming with the resolve of unwavering belief in what he does, in all its monstrousness.
Then come, try and take my soul from me.
What do you think, Magilou?
Trap. Melchior's greatest strength lies in his power over ice. I only wish we could lure him down here.
But we dare not forget. He's an exorcist who spent years plotting to awaken Innominat.
Exactly. He could be capable of anything. It'd be dangerous to assume otherwise.
Maybe this is the wrong time, but Magilou, you're related to Melchior.
Oh, are they finally going to talk more about this?
You'd better believe it's the wrong time. Long ago, I was Magilanica Loom Maven, Melchior's foster daughter. And before I was cast out, his disciple. Magilanica? The lost legate. So even after 10 years, my name still lives on.
I'm impressed. You must have commanded a lot of respect.
Not in the least. The relationship between Melchior and I was like that between Velvet and Artorias. The debts owed, and the grudges held. Velvet, you don't have to believe me. You may never believe me. But I tell you now, I want to settle my—
I don't much care about the affairs of a witch, now do I? I'm going to the peak to find him. Just doing what I want, like always.
Yep, that's right. And I'm going with you. Like always.
Yeah, Grail, this is one of the things that we talked about on the streams while you were gone. Because you're right, it is definitely shown to be the case in the windows into Arthur's past that we get in the Earth Pulse when Innominat is playing games with Velvet and trying to get her to give in to despair. We get the background that like Melchior was the one who was scheming to revive Innominat even before Arthur broke down over the loss of Celica and their unborn child, which is all the more interesting to me. And we talked about this in the last stream because really cool in the first place that part of those resolution scenes, which are typically just between party members, involves Magilou talking with Melchior, because he comes to town and she goes off to basically debate about the nature of the world and what the shepherd should be like with them. And remember, they're not just related in terms of the Abbey, they're also both mavens who are presumably of the same lineage of the maven who's the keeper of history in the world and Soray's guide in Tales of Vesperia. And if you listen to that conversation and argument between Melchior and his foster daughter, it really is like two different mavens in the sense of being the keepers and guides of the world's history, and the sort of like Obi-Wans to the Luke Skywalkers of the world, arguing over like whether it's right for the world to seek order or chaos. And you can really see how Melchior, in terms of his worldview, really was responsible for breathing life, not just into Arthur's plans, but into the particular model of shepherd that is manifested in Artorias, and the control he exerts over the world and how he manipulates it. Whereas Magilou, very clearly, I think, and probably if you go back to the beginning of the game now and watch her all the way through, you can see her guiding the party in this way. But especially now that she's fully resolved, you can see her, ironically, even though she's talking about the world in terms of chaos, advocating for the sort of self-determination and honesty with what it is you want, and freedom to be able to enact that in the world that Soray is all about. So you can see in that kind of family struggle between the watchers and guides of the world how it is that we're able to grow from what the antagonists want in Berseria to what it is that we're helping the heroes to achieve in Zestiria ages later. So I remember really loving Magilou even the first time I played this, when I didn't have Zestiria fresh in my head, but now seeing like that relationship and conflict between her and Melchior through the lens of everything that happens in Zestiria, especially with the Maven character, I think it's a really, really cool centerpiece for this game and its story and what it's wrestling with. Yeah, the Abbey has only been around for 3 years, Grail. Did Magilou say something that seemed to contradict that? One thing that was not super clear to me, which was kind of clarified in the streams that you missed, but it might tie into what it is that you're talking about, is the Abbey was only established after the Advent and everything that Arthur did. But it's also pretty clear that like the exorcists have existed for much longer, and it's not clear how long, because even Arthur, when we first see him discovered by Celica, he was part of a lineage of exorcists, and he had this fallen master whose name I'm forgetting, and Melchior was already an exorcist at some point. So that organizational infrastructure predated the Abbey and kind of coalesced into the Abbey around Artorias after he was able to use the Advent in order to raise everyone's level of resonance and gave them the ability to see demons and Malachim and everything like that.
Piece of cake, it's a cinch, piece of cinch. It's scorching, it's freezing, it's scorching.
What are you muttering about?
You told me to chill out when I complained about the heat. Is that still bothering you?
This reminds me of the exact opposite, Raven complaining about the cold and the ice drifts of Zohir, I think they're called, in Vesperia.
It's not scorzing. It's freaching, clearly.
That doesn't sound like me at all. Wait, that's not even my point. My skin feels like a frozen shell, but somehow my insides are boiling. This is miserable. It should be one or the other. I can't stand this fence-sitting.
Oh? Well, so what about the pineapple and sweet and sour pork?
Gross. A sweet omelet? A crime against nature.
Chocolate-covered raisins?
Whoever thought up dried grapes should be hanged.
Well, then what about peach pie?
I don't see what you're getting at.
What about yourself?
Utterly vile.
Doesn't that make you a fence-sitter?
That's why I'm having you eat that old man and shove him into the life spring.
I hope you learn to like yourself.
Don't try to embarrass me.
I love that line of Velvets. I hope you learn to like yourself. Oh yeah, that's interesting, Grail. So yeah, I don't I don't have a memory, maybe you do, but it sounds like you don't, of when it was that Eleanor joined up with the Exorcists. Because she may also have been in their ranks before the Abbey came to be, but I don't remember. I remember we know that she lost her mother, but I think that was when she was significantly younger, like when she was a child. So it may be that she was an Exorcist before the advent of the Abbey. It might be, and maybe there was a moment in the game that explained this that I'm forgetting. Because there's the advent that happened 3 years ago that started everything with Innominat and Velvet and the Therians. And then there's also the Scarlet Knight that was like far before the advent, and I forget if there was another name for it, but what basically started what the Abbey referred to as demon blight, like people giving in an epidemic sense to malevolence and turning into demons. So maybe it was that earlier Scarlet Knight that maps to when Exorcists started being a thing, which would make sense, right? If people started turning into demons en masse, then that would also be the motivation for creating like a League of Exorcists to combat them. So that might be the explanation. As I'm saying it, I'm talking myself into it. I forget when that's explained in the story, but I think that was when the Exorcist started, and then it was only with the infrastructure of Innominat and Artorias that they coalesced into the Abbey, which was sort of Exorcists who already existed, but in a much more regimented, totalitarian, world-governing forum. Coalesced in Logris as its Vatican City.
Don't waste my time.
See, JRPGs are easy to keep track of over their whole story. There are like 3 things you need to know. Come on, easy peasy. Bing, bang, boom. In and out. Yeah, usually not Tales, though. There definitely are some. I would not put Tales in that category. I love them. Like we were talking about earlier in this stream, I think all of their details and complexities are meaningful details and complexities. So I think they improve the game's overall structure and nuance by virtue of being there. But I will say, like, the other half of why it takes so long for me to put together readings like what I'm doing for Vesperia and Destiny is that I have to spend so much time going back and forth between very long scripts and very long, recordings of playthroughs in order to make sure, like, yes, I understand everything about how the world works. No, I didn't miss something somewhere. This is the best reading that I can do with as robust an understanding of the world as the text will allow me, which is, I don't want to throw in more religious references in terms of exegetical interpretations of things, but it really does kind of feel like something on that order in terms of needing to get and keep all of the details in your head at once while also doing interpretive jujitsu on them. But that's part of the fun of it, because you take that time and usually you do end up with some cool insights, not just about the game, but about your feelings with respect to it and what you're going to take from it as the lessons that stay with you at the end of the day. Yes, but that's the whole implicit lesson of Tales of Praxis, Grail. As you say, one could do that, but my god, why would you want to? Especially with something like the Tales games. Like, yeah, you could, but forget about doing the games a disservice. I really feel like that does the player a disservice, because you're leaving, like, so many cool insights and so much of the game's meat on the table. Like, I'll go back and play the old refrain that you and I talked through so often, especially in the end of Zestiria. You play that game at face value, you're not going to like it, and you're not going to understand what it's saying, because the inner meaning of that game is that you need to investigate the world and life and the people in it beyond its face value. So, like, that, I think for like the next while, until I find a better example of it, that will be the game in terms of like being a great poster child for why you shouldn't treat games like this at face value, because it can be, it's not even like getting less out of the game, it's like misunderstanding the game in some cases. And if a game has thoughtful depth, I would argue more often than not that will be the case. Don't get me started, dude. Especially when we're working through Act 3 and want to be doing like fun close reading stuff instead, because you know I agree with you. I mean, forget about speedrunning in terms of like literal speedrunning, which I know isn't what you meant, but just like I know there are pockets of the industry that are fighting back against this, so I don't want to make this out to be like a general condemnation of how the industry is nowadays, but I do feel like with just the hype cycle and constant deluge of new game releases, there is so much unnecessary pressure on people to speed through every game they're playing as soon as possible so they can get on to the next thing. And I'll be honest, I've even had to fight that urge with Tales of Praxis, because I find myself saying, all right, I want to be able to keep all these games in my head and I want to be able to get through them as efficiently as possible. And so I've had to like consciously take a break from Fantasia to work through the study on Vesperia and Destiny, and that's been kind of like an abrasive experience for me and something that I haven't enjoyed. But being able to just do what one of my favorite professors said about philosophy and take the time to think in slow motion and actually digest these games, it's a completely different experience. It's not just that you get more out of it, it's that you get something substantively different and more valuable to yourself out of it than just blowing through the game. So hopefully stuff like this in terms of live book clubs that take their time can do a little bit, you know, make a little contribution towards combating that and getting people to slowly digest their meals when it comes to gaming. It's true, Grail, and I'll say, if we're the real-life JRPG party, then that is the real-life JRPG manifestation of despair that we are fighting against at the moment. So we've got our work cut out for us, but hey, we'll pull out some badass mystic arts and pummel it into the ground and build a better world from the ashes. Not in the Hugo style of building a better world, the Alphen style of building a better world. Speaking of mystic arts. That's such a specific thing to say, Grail. Does like Jade have a special ability that only unlocks in NG Plus or something like that? You can just tell me, because I've done all of the NG Plus content that I wanted to do for Tales of the Abyss, because God bless the people who managed the port of it. They made that all accessible in NG as opposed to NG Plus. Not that I don't intend to NG Plus it, because, I mean, you know how I feel about Tales of the Abyss. And if ever there were a game that we felt like doing on the stream that I've also played off stream for Tales of Praxis, I was going to say that would obviously be Tales of the Abyss, but with all of the talking that we've done with Pottery about Tales of Vesperia, or even Tales of Destiny, especially as a like an old retro throwback, we have many good options. Oh, it's not this, but Super Hyper Resonance Cannon or whatever ridiculously cool named Mystic Art is the second one. Yes, I know. I looked up the the art exhibitions for those because I did want to see those without going all the way into NG Plus for it.
Chip has returned.
Great. Let's do this one non-getsu style, guys.
That is a very interestingly and sort of refreshingly niche way to do illusions and like intertextual connections between games. To have connections between like second tier mystic arts. That's kind of cool.
Scout ship departing.
I hope if the Eye of Atimony is something we can excavate, then we can also at least excavate someone like Dimlos so we have a fighting chance against it.
We will need to be extremely.
It's on! Oh, maybe it's off. That was rough. Velvet, that's the problem. You can die here. Oh, yes, that's why that name sounded familiar, because it is also Luke's second tier mystic art. Yes. It's all coming together for me now. Yeah, that's about right.
Dark and light.
Yeah, the analyst in me, thinks about that for 1 second too long and wants to ask, well, is there a meaningful way in which we can read phonons into the metaphysics of this world and its energy systems? But I feel like that would probably be a bit too big an inference to draw just based on the name of that art. But you're right, in the absence of something like that, it does seem like a bit of an anachronism. Oh my god. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to switch off of Velvet because she Therionizes, and then she can't land a single attack, so she just keeps... she keeps eating it and just eating all of her health. And then dying promptly. I'm going to try one more time. Come on, come on. Nope. Alright. I love it. I think it's great. I think it's very fair and balanced. I think this is the first time in the game when I'm going to pop one of those bottles that gives us a blast gauge, so we can get this girl out of here. I was just trying to counter it. There it is. I mean, at least Rokurou's counters dealt actually some damage and gave him some iframes, it looked like, so kind of find myself wishing I had tried that earlier. But hey, put that under the column of a W is a W. Ability to trigger a random skill which grants the player invincibility for a set time at the start of battle and chaos mode or above. Really helpful for our normal playthrough. But, as I said, W's a W.
We just need one last soul to awaken the elemental Empyreans.
Are you alright, Velvet?
I'll eat Melchior, and our collection will be complete.
I'm not worried about that.
That was such a dark thing to say in old, younger, innocent Velvet's voice.
Teresa and Oscar, remember?
You wonder if I'm fine after eating Shigure. It's not a problem.
But wasn't Shigure a lot more powerful than they were?
But look at me. I'm fine, right? Does it seem like I'm faking it?
No.
I think I'm just used to it. Both my body and mind.
You're not just used to it. You've changed.
Hmm?
Just as I changed after finding my free will, you've gotten stronger through our travels too. You faced down many sorrows and hardships, and overcame them all.
Did I, though?
You did. And that's why
I'll make you a quiche later.
Could you make pudding too?
Sure. But are you just trying to butter me up so I'll cook for you?
Well, I mean,
It's a valid strategy.
yeah. How did you know?
You really have grown a lot, haven't you? All right. Let's go and find me some Melchior to eat.
Yeah!
Oh, this was a boss in what, Grail? What were you playing? Did you say you were working through, Graces? Do I have that right? Or was it something else? Oh, Zilia, that's right. Is it a plot-relevant boss, or a spoiler-free one you can share? Just piling on the reasons for me to get to Zilia sooner rather than later, dude. Speaking of hidden agendas. Awesome. We got some good mojo this stream. It must be because you're back, Grail, because I also don't think I'd ever triggered Eisen's second tier Mystic Art in gameplay before now. I remember it well most recently, once again, speaking of knowing Berseria from EX Dungeons, from Eisen absolutely abusing my poor little Tales of Arise party with it. Oh, hilarious. Well, we'll have to talk about it once I get there then. Mazel tov on reaching the third act, though. That's huge. And how long have you been working on it again? It's been a very slow, methodical grind, right? Did you basically pick it up after that Graces run that you were talking about? Nice. And see, especially with a game or series you're already familiar with and you know and love, I feel like that's a pretty nice methodical pace for just churning through it and taking your time and, you know, not feeling like it needs to be some crazy rush. I will confess, especially as I get older, I'm one of those folks who has a hard time keeping a single game in his head for that long, so that as much as anything is why I try to take my time and slowly digest games like we were talking about, but definitely prioritize them while I'm working through them so that they don't take me an endless amount of time. But I know people like you who can take a much slower method to it, and I envy you that. I think really the last game I did that with, where I took an extended break in the middle, and it wasn't when I was replaying, it was actually one where I was playing it for the first time, and I wrote about my experience of taking a break with it and trying to understand why I did that in the article that I ultimately published on it, was Ni no Kuni, which I loved. I still think about that game so often because I think it really was a big part of what rekindled my love of gaming as I was kind of moving into my less adolescent and more adult phase. But I really didn't get it when I first picked it up and was working through it. And so as a result, I think I really got maybe like 5-10 hours in and then put it down for like several months. And then on a whim, I just figured, I don't really like leaving games unfinished. I felt like there was a lot that was pretty about that game, even if I didn't really get the story. So I guess I'll pick it back up, and ended up being probably like the game of the games I played that year. So sometimes you just gotta take your time and feel your way through the experience. That's part of the storytelling with something as interactive as video games, I'll tell you. I don't know, though. I mean, I guess it depends on what you want out of a camping trip, but for someone like me, I feel like juggling camping with working through a game that you're really into with someone you've been doing it with is like a very nice mashup. Like, those two experiences feel pretty thematically consonant to me. Because, they're both like, you're going on an adventure, a lot of bonding with the people you're on the adventure with. Maybe storytelling's involved in both. I don't know. There's something there. It feels right. I remember actually one of my favorite nature experiences in high school was I was seeing this girl at the time, and her family, her dad was like a proctor or a camp counselor or something at this like great outdoors camp in the mountains. And so they were there over the summer, and I visited her, and it was that exact kind of mashup of, hanging out in a like cabin in the woods style area, and I had also borrowed the PSP of a friend of mine, and it was my first time playing through Birth by Sleep in the Kingdom Hearts series, and it was just, oof. That's one of the things that I really love about the portable gaming experience that I hope never goes away, and why I hope we get, more systems like portable PlayStations and, more Switch-inspired stuff, because there is kind of a special magic, especially to discovering a new game that resonates with you in just pure nature, outside the context of, your home theater or your couch or wherever you typically play. That's hard to replicate if you're just staying at your home base. It's the magic that they were trying to capture in all the advertising for the Switch when that first came out. I think it was a successful ad campaign because that's a real thing and a real experience that a lot of gamers can resonate with. Yeah, that's fair, Grail. Well, if it were me with whom you were playing, we probably would have gotten through the whole thing, but to each their own. Yeah, sometimes you have to sort of modulate yourself in terms of what your gaming partner is in the mood for. I know that feeling all too well as well. Not chilling with the boys, anything but that. Groan. I'm glad you felt that you had to do that, because speaking as someone who also needs to be forced to have those experiences, I usually end up feeling happy that I was so forced.
It looks like no one is injured. Here I come.
Lava Atlas, by the way. Chef's kiss name for a regular field enemy in a Tales game. I love that.
You're not hurt, are you?
No, I'm fine.
Oh, Grail, I love that. And you know, that is a special kind of magic to that particular context too, because I feel like unless you're a very particular kind of person with a very particular kind of friend group, you're not going to be able to replicate those conversations in most contexts either. But there is something magic about a literal campfire or a similar just late night hang with the boys where you can just get in the right headspace to ask some really out there deep philosophical questions. It is, like, maybe they feel weird out of context, but also I feel like you learn so much about yourself and life in those conversations with your buddies. Like, I'm sure, especially when it comes to best friendships, like I think about my friendship with Dan, for instance, and I think for most of those friendships,
Sorry to cut you down.
you don't really get that close unless you have those sorts of conversations with each other. And not even just like a one-off, but on a pretty regular basis, you know? The special magic to that. I think that's sometimes what some of us at least seek out in a really great JRPG. Like, I know with my approach to Tales of Praxis, that's a big part of what brought me to the Tales games. Like, they can be these special engines for manufacturing the exact right kind of circumstances for wrestling with really serious and weighty philosophical questions and problems that come up in the real world as well, but the real world oftentimes doesn't end up having the right combination of circumstances to make it easy or natural for you to ask and answer those questions. Whereas JRPGs, their entire world and world history are meticulously designed to bring you on those journeys of philosophical interrogation and self-discovery. Which maybe, as I'm saying it that way, is why, like, story-driven video games, and especially JRPGs, mix so well with great outdoors adventures and campfires and everything like that.
Be proud. You made me unleash my full
It
power.
puts you in a similarly serious philosophical mindset. Done right, at least, it does.
I'm not sure what Melchior is really capable of. What kind of man is he?
To put it short, he's the exorcist's shadow.
Their shadow?
They're supposed to be free of malevolence, but they're only human, and so are those who they want to save. But sincerity and conviction alone won't save the world. To remain free of malevolence, they need someone to do their dirty work. A shadow.
I see. And that's Melchior's job.
Kind of like a Sin Eater, in the way we've described Velvet in the
I
past.
was never aware of what he was really doing.
So, why hasn't he succumbed to malevolence?
Because his belief in the exorcists as the saviors of the world is pure and unyielding. It is a mountain of ice that will neither boil, nor melt, nor break. I know the depths of his frozen heart all too well. Wait!
Reminds me of
Does
someone
that
like
mean-
Cardinal Fortin, or the many other villains who weren't actually Hellions, whom we met in Tales of Vesperia.
Yes. Melchior was raising me to be the shadow for the next leader of the exorcists, Artorias himself. But that was a terrible mistake. I was unable to live up to his expectations.
So if things had gone as he planned, we'd be fighting you instead of Melchior.
I'm glad that didn't have to happen.
True. If Magilou was running the Abbey,
They would be completely unpredictable. That would be fearsome.
Maybe, but doesn't that sound like a whole lot of fun? So Melchior was my shadow too.
Oh, feeling too sympathetic to fight him.
I wouldn't say that.
There's nothing to be sad about. Removing shadows is part of a shadow's job. Even if I'm a failed shadow, I'm still a witch, and I cast a deeper darkness.
I like that idea of characters like Eleanor only now discovering what characters like Melchior meant to her and the relationship in which she stood to them all along. We can cover another one of the identical spaces on our Aaron Mentions Tales of the Abyss bingo card, by the way, because the one thing that's also interesting to me about Tales of Berseria, which I had forgotten, is in this run-up to the finale, confronting these legates, it's really interesting how this late in the game, it's only in learning about the legates and the characters' relationships with them that a lot of the details about the characters' own identities come out. Like, we're finally learning about Magilou, and really only because Melchior has finally come to the forefront. Just like Rokurou, like, we knew a bit more about him, but he's only really opened up now that he's finally had his ultimate confrontation with Shigure, which reminds me of a little game called Tales of the Abyss and the kind of storytelling ethos around the confrontation with the god generals, whom, you know, it's not quite like the legates, because I think you have like higher touch encounters with the god generals, I would say, versus the legates across the course of the game. But in the final run up to Van and Eldrant, it is very similar, where you get a lot of the final confrontations that reveal a lot about the characters in your own party that had been buried beneath the surface up until that point. All about setting the stage for the right context and even more the right confrontation for that truth to finally become relevant, I guess.
Let's do our best.
Oh, Grail, I love that. That's one of my favorite conversation types too, right? Like, okay, let's just assume for the sake of argument, crazy thing. Now can we work through all the implications of that and what it means for the world? Because oftentimes, even if it's absurd, you learn a hell of a lot about your friends and the way you think about things along the way, in my experience. This isn't quite as well-oiled a story. It's more of just a similar anecdote. But one of my most quoted exchanges with a buddy of mine, actually an old standard on the stream, a deep cut, but for people who watched the Dawn of the New World stream, a fellow video game analyst and another close friend of mine, Matt McGill, he dropped in and played with me, and he's made some great contributions to the site over the years, and we went to undergrad together. And at one point, I was thinking about, there was this girl I was interested in, and I was trying to figure out whether she was available or not. So we were hanging out one day, and I asked him, "Hey Matt, how do you tell whether a girl you're interested in is single or not?" And he just, without missing a beat, said, "Oh, that's easy. You just kill her boyfriend. Then you know she's single." Something about just the special magic absurdity about that resonates with your story to me, Grail. I think there's some lesson in there about manly bonding or something similar, but I can leave that as a conclusion to be drawn by the viewer.
just ahead. If Melchior's anywhere, he's there.
Be careful. That crafty old buzzard is nothing like Shigure. He won't fight us head on.
Night and day, the two poles of approaches to battle between Shigure and Melchior. Nice to have that yin and yang. Another Fairy Tales thing, I'm telling you. I love that though, Grail. I'm telling you, that's a sure sign of a solid friendship. To be able to talk very passionately and in a like robust dialectic with each other about who cares, the subject matter is not that important at the end of the day. Something special to that. That's exactly what it is. See, it's all connected. We're just working on unwinding the inner meaning of Tales of Berseria through your adventures with your friends while camping. And you know, we saw Rokurou and Aizen learned a lot about each other and about Laphicet through that as well. So it's a language that's true to those kinds of friendships.
Is victory for us really possible? We're facing the legate, Lord Melchior.
I'd give us around 4 to 1 against.
4 to 1? Are our chances that slim?
Almost every trick I or any current exorcist knows can be traced back to him. If I throw out 3 hearts at once, he'll pull 6 out.
The father of all
He has
tricks.
capabilities and he's got far more power. 4 to 1 might be generous.
Illusions, Michael. I'm the father of all illusions.
The boy and Rokurou. Who knows what value they'll add when they run.
For any Arrested Development fans out there.
But if luck goes our way, our chances will rise considerably.
Right. We are challenging the hardest possible foe.
But I'm only talking about a straight-up fight. Knowing Melchior, he'll have some nasty tricks.
No matter how you analyze it, the outlook is grim.
Aizen, you too?
What's wrong with a level-headed look at things? Careful consideration could give us the tool we need to turn the odds in our favor. After all, Magilou, forewarned is forearmed, right?
Yes, that's true.
Even still, we won't find a weakness in him.
Let's take another hard look. What we need might be lying right at our feet.
At our feet, eh? I'll keep my eyes on the ground as we walk then.
Our scout ship has returned!
Ugh. So close to the trip W's.
Worked! Huge success!
Pirate flag. Cumulonimbus crew.
Good luck out there. Don't come back empty-handed.
I don't know that that flag has anything to do with destiny, per se. Yeah, it looks like it's just a material. Aaron's hunting the specials. That's where most of the callouts have been, I think. Yeah, we got the cleric staff. Mince armament from Albane.
Scout ship
We'll find something. I got a good feeling about this one.
Let's do our best!
Ready to die? Think you can dodge? Just try. Perfect mayhem!
He's a pirate!
Oh yeah, absolutely, Grail. That's such a vibe. Just being able to put all the rest of the world to the side and experience the world itself. It's funny because, again, I feel like that's an area where video games can be so instructive and illuminating because they too have such beautiful worlds, but it can sometimes be hard to stop and just appreciate those. Like, I still remember how amazed I was the first time when, you know, I got really into Dark Souls in high school, and then I watched a buddy of mine playing it for the first time, and he played it in a totally different way than I did because I was just so focused on working through the plot and fighting the enemies, but he would actually stop in the middle of these gorgeous environments that FromSoft had developed for it, and he would just stop like this and turn the camera around and just appreciate how beautiful the world was. And I feel like what you're talking about in terms of camping is the same thing. Like, being able to just exist in the world. It sounds like it should be the easiest thing to do, but especially in the modern world, I feel like we bend over backwards to give ourselves every distraction to pull ourselves away from that, which is so sad. As I've been bullying myself into taking up running to try to get myself even modestly back in shape, I've been enjoying a lot of that as well, because as much as I don't want to be in Colorado for the long run, it is nice to be, in a bit of nature by the mountains and everything like that, and being able to just step out of the daily rhythm to just focus on the physical action of running, and kind of freeing up my mind to look at and appreciate the world around me is really special. Gives you a different perspective on that environment that you inhabit day in, day out. It's a special thing. Something as simple as I was talking with a different colleague of mine the other day about just making the active decision to turn off your phone. Again, sounds like it should be such a simple thing, probably something we should all do more, but in the modern world, it's like, even if you're not working and trying to focus on yourself, so often we'll keep our phones on because we have this expectation maybe there'll be some message or something that I don't want to miss, or that FOMO that you were talking about earlier, right, Grail? And it binds our consciousness to that kind of virtual world in a way that is kind of involuntary, and even if we don't realize it, pulls us out of just a presentism with regard to the world around us. So taking the time to actually just fully turn it off and inhabit the present moment. Put it that way, it sounds more new age than I wanted to, but man, kind of sad that our modern society has brought us to that point. But it's nice to have little tips and tricks like playing video games and appreciating their environment to just kind of retrain us to ground ourselves in the real world just as thoughtfully. Oh yeah, I know the exact region that you're talking about, Grail. Well, maybe I do. There are two regions. I assume you're talking about Dohalim's domain, like the Earth region with all the lush greenery. But maybe you're talking about Oh no, I know what you're talking about. Like the region before you get to Ganabelt's domain, like that little bridge area. Yes, with the waterfalls, right? That whole little indoor-outdoor ruins. So I didn't know which area you were talking about exactly, but now I do. That is a beautiful vista, absolutely. Yeah, if not for all the Zoogles, you have to imagine that a lot of Danans would have settled there, just for the beauty of the scenery. Although I suppose they did, right? That's why there are ruins there. Well... Oh, well, we got the hoverboard, or the geoboard rather, so I was thinking we should go back to the area that just opened up, but I feel like in the dungeon so far, that geoboard access area at the end of the dungeon has been the path out. So I'm gonna say maybe it's not worth going back just yet. We can forge ahead and stuff.
Victory is ours.
They're also nice in Arise. One of the other things you missed, I was saying I got the collector's edition and continuing to fill out my my physical collection of Arise. And the art book for that is, I mean, I love all the art books that the Tales series puts out, but I think just because of the level of detail they put into every single vista and environment there, because the different biomes are such a core part, again, a core part of the story that they want to tell. It's not just the world, it's the way they represent narrative meaning. The pages of the art book that's just filled with concept arts for those different domains is really breathtaking. It's something to really appreciate as a collection of artworks, because that's what they are. All right, buckaroos, let's buckle up. Big Hat Melchior and the volcano. There's so many jokes there. Part of me wants to go with a Big Hat Logan joke from Dark Souls. Part of me wants to go with a Joe versus the volcano joke. I'm getting joke paralysis. Help me.
The four elemental Empyreans are the beings that maintain the balance and harmony between earth, water, wind, and fire. Ever even stopped to think about why they sleep? About what waking them will do to this world's order?
Not really. I don't much care.
You know, I was kind of wondering about that.
They sleep because of arrogant, insolent wretches like you. The Empyreans derive their power and that of their blessings from the prayers of the pure at heart. But humans became corrupted and neglected their prayers. The forgotten Empyreans drifted into slumber.
Yeah, he's a sleeper hit for sure, Grail.
Human prayers are the
He's really
source
grown
of
on me.
power? Just like the Malachim.
Are you trying to say Innominat blesses someone when he eats their soul?
As the fifth Empyrean, Innominat's purpose is to eat human souls, malevolence and all, and to wipe the slate clean.
Oh, that's interesting.
When all mankind
So Innominat is not a Phagos.
pure as a newborn babe,
I'd forgotten
the
that.
elemental Empyreans can be safely revived.
You want to wipe the slate? But that means...
Yes, civilization will crumble. The spread of malevolence, the cleansing of Innominat, the cycle has repeated countless times over the eons. That is why human civilization rises and falls. But if this continues, humanity will never surpass a certain threshold. Thus, the Abbey will control Innominat's power, so that we may guide humanity into a new, better era.
It all makes sense now. You developed the art of armatization to control Innominat.
And in order to create the Armatus, you needed the technology found in Siegfried, didn't you?
Man, this is really interesting.
So that's why you got Ifried involved in all of this.
I'd totally forgotten this twist.
Just as light cannot exist without darkness, no great achievement comes without sacrifice. Even I must be made tribute for the sake of our ideal world!
So it's like, since we're doing Tales of Praxis and all these comparative readings, and since my head is oversaturated with Tales of Vesperia right now, I made that allusion to the Autophagos, which is the kind of built-in natural kill switch of the worlds in Terca Lumere, Vesperia's world. And this is kind of an interesting play on that, where what if the world had that kind of natural kill switch to control cycles of development, but then instead of humanity just accidentally triggering it, humanity actually tried to find a way to weaponize and use it for its own sake, which is not something that they dwell on in Vesperia, but is an interesting thought for remixing that kind of world design. Yeah, Grail, we can talk more about that, but for now, for the sake of not interrupting Melchior, I would just say watch the VODs for sure. I think you'll get a lot out of them, but wrestling with those ideas is a big part of what we did with the content that you missed, because a lot of that speaks directly to those ideas.
No, you don't!
Eisen, stop!
I told you, he's a crafty old buzzard.
I should have known it wouldn't be that simple.
Pretty cool outfit.
Rebellious fools, ill-fallen so far.
Magilou can no longer! I am the evil witch!
feel like we want Magilou in the fray. For thematic reasons. Yeah, I can imagine how this fight would be annoying for you, Grail. The first fight with him was pretty annoying too, especially with needing to manage number 2 on top of him. Nice at least to just have the single Melchior now. Oh, Jesus. Good name. Oh! This is a little bit of a jump scare, isn't it?
How very unlike me.
He reminds me a little of Mark Hamill's face. Which, Mark, if for whatever reason you somehow end up stumbling upon the stream or VOD, I mean that as a compliment. You have a very expressive face. Of course, the one time we could take advantage of Spell Absorber. Didn't have the souls for it at the moment. There we go. There we go. Eat it! It's fun, it's fair, it's balanced. I love it. Oh my god, and we have no souls again. On the field, god damn it. I keep forgetting we have bottles that can solve this for us.
Imprisoned by the coldest cold, there you shall perish!
Because the name Mega Absolute was already taken. No, but I stand by it. That's a very cool name. Yeah, it is interesting to think about why this game doesn't have overlimit. And Vesperia didn't either, right? I hadn't really processed that until you just said it, actually, Grail. But that's a pretty interesting distinction between this and the typical Tales game. Yeah, that's true. Then it would be even more unbalanced in our favor somehow. Matt! I was just talking about you a few minutes ago. Speak of the devil and utter the name Matt McGill 3 times into a streaming camera and he'll appear. Oh, why didn't I think of doing something super effective? Matt, you're so smart. This is why they let you be a doctor. See, the trouble here is it's harder to do super effective moves consistently than you would hope. Mr. Dr. Professor Matt to you. Yeah, but I don't know, Grail. Like, I know what you mean, but on the other hand, I feel like I can see a version of Zestiria that leans into its themes and combat even more by doing, like, a special kind of overlimit you can only access in Armatization, you know what I mean? Like, when the, think of it almost like a Pacific Rim thing, like, once you get fully synchronized with the other party and you're just, like, totally engaged and dialed in with, like, realizing the intersection of both parties' dreams. Like, I could see that being a really cool narrative basis within the world for going super mega over limit. You could even call it the Overmatis, which is a great name, and it's worth doing for that reason alone. Yeah, Grail, this is my other dear friend and game analyst, Matt McGill, whom I was mentioning to you earlier. Matt Grail is one of our diehard, stalwart members of the real-life JRPG party. Probably the most diehard right now, although we've been ragging him because, well, he's been a constant and amazingly engaged presence in the streams. He then dipped for like a week and a half to go on a camping trip, which we're very happy for him about, but we're also going to rag him about until the end of time, or at least until the end of this playthrough. Yeah, Matt's being here is a great reminder because I do think it would be a lot of fun at some point to integrate Discord chat into the stream for remote guest spots, which would be a wonderful addition to everything that we've already been doing in terms of the format of the stream and the book clubness of it all. But I am woefully technically inept and need a little bit of lead time to figure that out. But we had floated the idea for this evening, so I'm sure it will manifest sooner or later.
100 years younger.
100?
Fair enough, Grail.
To his life.
Asked and
Centuries
answered.
even.
Is that what you call rational? Sounds like an obsession.
I've said the same thing thousands of times. If it were my choice, I'd have let myself die naturally long ago. But did he not say? Man can turn reason into disorder, but also can we surpass it? Our true power is in transcending the possible to achieve the ideal.
So were the words of the exorcist Claudin.
They were foolish.
Think what you will. I'll show you the truth of his words.
Oh, Jesus.
You think illusions will work on us now?
Not in the least. But it bought me enough time to finish my art.
Are you trying to set off the volcano?
They'll die too!
As long as I take the Lord of Calamity with me, I have no regrets. That's because I've no reason.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow, what a cool moment.
Oh! How dare you insult Claudin's ideal soul!
Hey, Master. Emotions are a real pain, aren't they?
It's Sudoku, by the way. It's not a hard last name. It's just Sudoku.
You're damn right I will!
But you call me by whatever and I'll answer.
Period! The Lord of Calamity is here! Sweat the hell off!
Wow, what a scene. Wow. That looked sort of like the mycelia of fungi, like a fungus network to me, and kind of like, well, actually, Matt would know more about this than I, but it sort of reminded me of those intertangled earth pulses of the synapses of a brain, which is an interesting model for the channeled energies of the world. Ah, they're pushing Innominat's domain inward. What a great way of showing that. Oh no! Yamato no Orochi! Oh, because the Windows logo. That one took me a minute. Is what you think it was Eldrent with extra steps, Grail? Fill another spot on your Tales of the Abyss bingo card.
The elemental Empyreans have awoken.
We are free. We will no longer be your tools.
Oh, that's awesome. The Malachim have gotten their free will back.
What's happening?
Yeah, completely agree with you, Grail. I will say one of the things that I've been delighted to see develop with the series as the technological specs have improved over the now decades is the inclusion of more really thoughtful and well-polished anime cutscenes, and those really never disappoint and are always a highlight for me. And add to, to such a cool, like, rich multimedia presentation of these games where they do feel, I think, more textured because they have the gameplay and the game style world and then the anime cutscenes interspersed in a way that you don't get in every JRPG. So those are always really special to me. It was interesting too because, and I'll get off my my Vesperia Destiny horse in a second so that we can dig back into this, but it was really interesting to see Melchior pontificate on his ethos and really the ethos of Exorcist Claudin, who I don't think they've said this, but I take it was sort of the founder of the Exorcists in terms of his beliefs and dogma formulating their whole system of beliefs. But that idea of being able to transcend reason and that being the purpose of humanity by being able to represent and enact an ideal, super reminiscent with the representations of Alexei in Vesperia and Hugo in Destiny. But with the nuanced difference, though, I think that those two enemies are the linchpins of the second acts in the games. So you've gone from fighting these sort of rank and file factions in the first act to now fighting people who don't really understand the world, but are amassing an army and a group behind a system of beliefs and an ideals of how the world should be versus how it is. And then you move on to the real end game in the third act. So to have Melchior kind of expounding that same ethos of following an ideal rather than a praxis within the world, but in this different context of using him as an instrument in the third act in order to actually change the world yourself as a party. It's interesting to see that point of comparison and contrast. Yeah, I think they're both vibes, right, Grail? I mean, that's one of the things that's great about the series too. You get, both in the animation styles and in the just the game graphic styles, so many different like visual languages over the years. Really helps to make each game feel like a world of its own, despite how much they all keep apparently collapsing into Tales of the Abyss and Aldrent in one way or another.
Thanks. If you hadn't thrown Melchior off balance, we'd all be dead.
I settled my own affairs. Nothing more. But if you want to thank me, I accept gifts.
I take it back.
He
A
couldn't
girl
hurt
after
those
my own heart.
flowers. Was that his oath?
No. That old fool loved flowers more than anything else. Far more than he did any living human. That's all there was to it.
I suppose even a legate can never fully control his heart.
Same goes for a witch. Sometimes living can be the hardest affliction. Have the 4 elemental Empyreans awakened?
Who knows? But anything that would sleep through that isn't worth our time.
Better watch your mouth or they'll smite you. I can feel a shift in Innominat's domain.
Yeah. All 4 of them have awoken. Innominat has been pushed out from the Earth pulses.
Humanity's amplified resonances will diminish, and many Malachim will regain their free will. The Exorcists will likely lose a good chunk of their forces.
Yeah, I actually have a thought about that, Grail.
Have you
We'll
lost
talk
your
about it after
ability
the
to
skip.
fight too?
Sorry to disappoint, but I can still see you. Evil demons, Malachim, and witches alike.
You know where he is.
I can feel him. His body has left the Earth pulses. He's somewhere above the Empyrean's throne now. Artorias is with him. However, Innominat is pushing back against the other Empyreans with incredible force.
If the 4 are defeated, we'll lose our last chance. No time to waste.
Let's go. It's time
We
to
take
end
the
this.
fight to them. And then we take the fight to them. So my thought, one of the it's too bad that you weren't able to watch the last stream with us, Grail, but one of the things that was really cool about the scene between Melchior and Magilou in the town on the way to Mount Kilrouse, when everyone was having their resolutions, was like I think I mentioned, one of the key aspects of their debate is sort of in what kind of world the shepherd should be shepherding humanity towards, whether that's one of order or chaos. And when Magilou really eloquently speaks to the value of chaos, it's basically cashed out in the same terms as we're led to think about the ethos of Soray's party. So even though, ironically, Soray is also facing a Lord of Calamity and putatively fighting against a certain conception of chaos, he's also endorsing something that the Abbey at least would see as chaotic, namely this idea that everyone is entitled to their own belief system and to be able to act in the world according to those beliefs, which is very different than the kind of pure homogeneity that you see in the world of the Abbey after the ritual of suppression, when they've tried to make everyone effectively, completely disposable and interchangeable robots, for want of a better term, right? And so Magilou speaks to the value of chaos in a sense that is closely of a piece with the idea of natural life, and the flowers show up in that scene as basically a symbol of that kind of chaotic impulse to life that she sees as worth defending in the world. And then the really touching ending of the scene is that Melchior, is talking the talk about the value of order and what it is that the Abbey is trying to do. But then at the end of the day, when he leaves the scene, there's a very clear moment in which he could stamp the flowers out to make his point against Magilou, and instead he steps over them. So Magilou clocks that and understands that, and then obviously uses it against him at the end in order to trip him up and allow Velvet to get the upper hand at Kilrouse, like we just saw. But that's really interesting to me, and it almost makes me wish maybe there's a side quest we can find that goes into Melchior's past, because that idea that at the end of the day he really does understand and appreciate the value of what Magilou is saying and the ethos of Velvet's party makes me think, well, this is a guy who's been around forever. He's taken an oath. He's imposing the system of ideals that he seems to be desperately clinging to, but at the end of the day he doesn't even really believe in. That formula in a Tales game, to me, adds up to someone who had some kind of trauma in his past that he's trying to figure out how to cope with or erase in a way that he just like doesn't know how to handle it, and so he's processing it in really unhealthy ways. So I want to know more about this dude Melchior and how he came to be who he is based on his past. I hope we get that, but honestly, I don't know whether we will.
Take a look at this.
But certainly it does seem, and maybe part of it is that there was that whole discussion that Magilou had of how he's meant to be the Abbey's shadow, and so I wonder whether this perhaps ties into that, the idea that even though he's making the Abbey's vision possible as their shadow, he actually kind of, for all his belief in it, is the sort of person at the end of the day who, along one dimension at least, is antithetical to it. That's interesting. Quickie Peninsula. Yeah, I think it'll definitely be interesting to see if other people in the towns lose the ability to see the gang grail. They've said a lot of times that Eleanor is sort of a rose type in terms of having like a very high level of resonance intrinsically, so I don't think she would. But I take your point. I think it would be really, really cool to see the Earth starting to change in that way. Because that would make sense. We've gotten the explanation that Innominat's waking up has basically imposed upon people an artificially high level of resonance. And so his domain being forced out by the other Empyreans, that would be like a natural reason why people would start to, on the whole, get less resonant with regard to Malachim and demons. The land of a peculiar language called Melnyx. The Van Eltia once sailed as far as this peninsula, and it is on the edge of the map. But I still want to hunt down the special items in Sordian Peninsula, so I'm going to send us here one more time.
Show 'em how Ifrit's crew can sail.
Ha! You know, Grail, that is one of those hypothetical games that I would really, really be interested to see. Because it's not something like what you get in Tales of Symphonia, where, yeah, you don't get to directly see the Karlan War, but you get so much lore and so many perspectives on it that it kind of feels like a game where you play as the Mythos, Kratos, Ewan, Martell party would be superfluous or uninteresting. Here, it seems like you know enough to want to know what happened back then, but it's also too deeply buried in the past or too outside the focus of what these characters care about for you to actually get enough information, which kind of speaks, I think, to the different narrative perspective of this game in a way that's interesting to contrast it with other games in the series, but definitely makes me want to know more about that era, especially in a sub vein of the series where we know that there's already more than one game showing us different windows into this world. How cool would it be to have that extra window?
Doesn't appear to be erupting, or doing anything else, really. I'd say that's a relief.
Were Melchior's claims only a bluff?
I'm not convinced. Most of his threats had as much truth in them as he could muster.
With the 4 Empyreans revived, the land is awakened. Changes in the Earth that once took eons will now happen in a few hundred years.
A few hundred years?
The mountain will erupt, but not for a long while.
A long while to a human, maybe. But compared to the history of the land, it'll be a blink of an eye.
But Innominat is the Empyrean of suppression. Who can say what will happen when we kill him?
Well, it's not like I care anyway. I think we should care.
Velvet, I would say, clearly starting to wrestle with the reality that as much as she might love her brother and hate Innominat, at the end of the day, they're the same being, and killing one of them probably means killing the other.
Melchior sure was strong, wasn't he?
Yeah. If it weren't for Magilou's help, we wouldn't have stood a chance.
But you saw the opening she gave us and took it.
Did you want to be the one to finish him off?
If it mattered to me, I'd have fought him alone. We all had our reasons to fight him. The opportunity just happened to be yours. That's all there is to it.
I understand.
If Melchior had only manipulated Ifrit for personal reasons, then that would be settled now. But he was acting based on his idea of reason. That creating a world without malevolence was worth the cost of destroying people's free will. Ifrid won't be avenged until I destroy that very philosophy.
Your business with the Abbey
I love
isn't
that.
done.
Not even close. You all could just sit around twiddling your thumbs, and I'd still take the heads of Artorias and Innominat on my own. If you want to be the ones to finish them off, you'll have to beat me to it.
You're on.
I'll fight with everything I've got. That's all I can do.
That's plenty.
Well, actually, I said I loved that, and then I thought about it for 2 more seconds. And the sense of foreboding that I feel now is, you know, it's all well and good and heartwarming to see Eisen steel himself with that regard, saying, I'm going to dismantle the entire philosophy on which the Abbey was based because it led to the death of my friend. But we have to remember and keep in focus as well, speaking of foreshadowing, we know this dude ends up corrupted by malevolence of the worst kind and transformed into a dragon. So there has to be something about the way he lives his life from here on out that makes that so. And so it's sad and fills me with a bit of dread to imagine him taking that resolve to what might be the logical conclusion, but also the conclusion of him giving into that malice and becoming a dragon. Yeah, Grail, that's a super interesting point about Claudin potentially being a Martel figure, especially with, like we've been wrestling with across the stream, like this whole playthrough, all the shifting definitions of reason. That could be such fertile ground, because even if he were the first exorcist, it's super easy for me as well to imagine that what he meant by reason and what he was trying to do in setting up their principles was totally different from the abstracted idealism that Melchior then took from him and imposed upon everyone else who not only came to formulate the Abbey, but also, you know, gave birth to the Shepherd Artorias, gave birth to Innominat, everything like that. So that could be really interesting to see, like the moving target of a philosophy of reason and idealism over the years.
I really don't mean to pry, but I've got to know. Does it feel good to pinch all those souls out from your stomach?
That's kind of a gross.
That's what I was gonna say.
I
Ugh.
have to agree with Velvet. The way you put it sounds so inappropriate.
I'm pretty
Pinching
sure
out
that
souls.
was her point.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Why so cranky? I was only asking to see if you were getting hungry or not.
Then ask that in the first place.
Are you? Hungry, that is.
I do feel hungry, now that you mention it, but I don't think it has to do with losing those souls.
Then why is it?
Maybe my appetite is increasing as Innominat's suppression weakens.
Yeah, I'm suddenly feeling hungry myself.
My stomach could start growling at any moment.
Oh no, these
I
guys are gonna
haven't
make
been
me
thinking
hungry.
nothing but delicious things to eat for a while now.
I bet Magilou only brought it up because she's feeling peckish herself.
No, that's not the reason at all.
That settles it then. When we get back to the ship, you can take guard duty while we eat.
I'll make a quiche and pudding.
I'll cook up some penguin and tomato stew.
Ooh, I'd love to try your cooking, Madame Eleanor. Let's get back to the ship.
Getting all fired up about food. I would never... I would kill for a big bowl of sweet Kurogane-style borscht!
Then go find me some peaches.
Why peaches?
Because you can't have Kurogane borscht without peach pie for dessert.
They are making me hungry. Okay, so jokes about hunger aside, that does flag an interesting thing for us to keep track of as we progress through the remainder of Act 3, because they've just been clear that with the Innominat's domain weakening, his suppressive influence is also weakening, which is potentially putting the people of the Earth more in touch with their various visceral needs and the sentiments he'd been suppressing. So it'll be interesting to see whether we see any shifts in behavior in the party or even their perspective on the world, and whether that might be due to Innominat being further away and they're being more in touch with their basic nature. It puts a different perspective or spin on what we were just saying about Eisen. Like, if now he has this resolve that seems pretty transparently to run the risk of pushing him towards malevolence and demonization, maybe the reason for that sudden shift is not just his resolve following the defeat of Melchior, but in fact more of a fully actualized essence that's no longer being suppressed by Innominat. My guess, Grail, would be that's because you took a break and came back. I would say for my part at least, no, I don't feel that it's jarring. Actually, on one of the streams, it sounds like one of the ones that you missed, I basically made the opposite point. I think one of the things that has sort of brought me around on her voice actress, because I know I've kind of gone back and forth on how agreeable I found her voice acting in the game, is that I think there's what I would call a fairly subtle and cool way where starting probably around like the end of Act 2, the start of Act 3 in the story, we've had the models of Velvet's voice as kind of this innocent Disney princess before the Advent, and then this, what's the right word for it? Not edgy, but much more grittier and reserved and resolved character following her imprisonment. And now I think we've reached this interesting middle ground where what she does with the voice acting is something of a synthesis of both of those. Like, she still has her edge and resolve, but she's much more willing to be soft and vulnerable, especially with the people in the party. Like when she's talking about making a meal, especially, since that's something that does have a connection with her childhood. And so I think it actually strikes me as a cool way of using the voice acting to demonstrate the growth that she's been through throughout the story. Well, yeah, but how is she supposed to do that, right, Grail? Because so much of her character was bound up in, like, a misunderstanding of her relationship with her brother and correspondingly herself. So it really wasn't until she could get, like, a different perspective on her brother, qua Innominat, that she could undergo that growth, which was why, I would argue, and I think I talk about this in the stream that you miss, it's so cataclysmic and, like, destructive of her self-concept at that flashpoint when Innominat reveals everything to her, which, by the way, is exactly what Innominat and Artorias were banking on, and why it's such a Herculean feat, literally and figuratively, for Laphicet and Aizen to pull her back to Earth and help her to really go through all that growth at once. I think that's part of why that scene is so moving for me, is the fact that by virtue of how Velvet has to grow and the circumstances that are put upon her, it feels to me like all of the growth you might expect to happen over like several acts condensed into a single critical moment. And I think that's really cool. And you couldn't get away with that in every game, but I think the structure and setup of the various conflicts and tensions between characters and their familial relations and how that cements them within certain self-concepts makes Tales of Berseria uniquely well poised to get away with that kind of storytelling. Oh, this is good. It's helping us keep track of some of the side quests that we need to see through at some point, at least. I don't remember whether we can get out through Melchior, but we can check at least. I mean, do I have to be the self-serving one to say maybe you no longer dislike it because of all the work we've done on Tales of Praxis? Because I'll say it if no one else is going to. But jokes aside, I would be interested, especially given that you know that you felt restrained from liking her character for that reason in the past. If you do have a sense of sort of which aspects of the game you've been reconsidering to come around on that, I think that would be really interesting for us to think about.
Glad to see you made it back in one piece, Velvet.
I'm here on orders from the boss to help you guys out.
We could certainly use it. How are things back in the city?
I came here from Helives, so I don't know how far the suppression has progressed.
But I can tell you that the Abbeys designated the area north of Helives as a Class 4 administrative zone.
Which means they've pulled their forces out of the area.
What about the people of Melchior?
Everyone got out safe and sound, although they did petition for the extermination of the Lord of Calamity.
Of course.
I say we make this town our new hideout. When else are we ever gonna find a hideout that comes with hot springs?
That's a good idea. We should leave Kamoana and the others here.
Dial, could you stay and help them out?
As if you even had to ask.
Wow, that's surprisingly reliable for you, Dial.
Hey, that hurts. Now get going already. Benwick and the crew are making preparations in Helives right now. Hey, Rokurou, how'd the showdown with your brother turn out?
I killed him.
My man.
Break Stormhowl.
Is that because Stormhowl was an even stronger sword than Kurogane's?
No. Even with Shigure's full strength behind it, Stormhowl didn't even leave a nick in Kurogane's blade. If I didn't have this sword, I'd be dead now. I think I just couldn't break Stormhowl because I'm still too inexperienced.
But you won the match, didn't you?
Yeah, but only by combining my techniques with Kurogane's craftsmanship.
If that's the case, then as long as you're wielding it, that sword is Stormquell. After all, Kurogane's sword did quell the Godblade's raging storm.
Do you think Kurogane would agree?
Are you kidding? You know how stubborn that guy is. He'd just say he'd forge something even stronger the next time. And that's why I say you shouldn't be satisfied with how you are either, Rokurou.
I know. I'll find even stronger opponents to cut down. By my hand, Kurogane's Stormquell will become even more legendary than Stormhowl ever was.
That's the spirit. Show him what we demons can do.
Oh, I really love that. It's another very Tales of Destiny thing, like Kurogane brings his own character as the sword, and that alone is not enough for him to be Stormquell, and Rokurou brings his own techniques, which alone would not be equivalent to Stormquell, but the synthesis of them are what counts as Stormquell. It's very touching. Well, we're in the Hot Springs town, so we have to check if the Hot Springs are now available, since they weren't the first time we came through Melchior. Yeah, that's fair. When I think back to a lot of games which I first played when I'm 13 and then revisited later, I think that describes my relationship with a lot of them too. It's hard to see some stories, and well, just hard to see life clearly when you're 13 years old, I reckon. I know, God, I was dumb. Why was I ever 13? Ooh, I smell a hot spring scene. I smell the restorative minerals and cheap comic jokes of a hot springs.
Grimoire, could we talk?
You sound so serious.
Oh, maybe I was premature.
Like it's the eve of the final battle.
Well, isn't it? Can't you let yourself get caught up in the moment for a change?
Getting caught up in the moment is for young, foolhardy lovers. So, what is it you want to talk about?
I just figured I should drop by since, well, like I said, the final battle with Innominat is coming up and all.
Ugh, you're talking like you're saying your last goodbyes.
It's just that we're up against a lot. Even Miss Magilou doesn't know what the future holds for us, and she almost always has that stuff figured out.
Whether she has it figured out or not, it is our lot in life to follow our vessels and fight to
I
the
love
very
that phrase of defeating high school as well, Grail. I think that's a great way to think of it.
Magilou's craziness up till now, but she's never thanked me for it. No, good job, Bienfu. No, I'm glad I'm your vessel. Not even something like, I'll introduce you to a cute girl when it's all over.
Yes, and Grail, when you're my ripe old age, just imagine how differently you'll see your 13-year-old self. That's another thing that changed while you were away. I had my birthday, so now I'm even more of an old man, rapidly approaching the domain of the likes of Raven and Regal and all our other favorite old men from the series.
It'd be nice to hear a little gratitude from her, even just once.
Surely you know she's not the type to do that sort of thing, though, yes?
That's all the more reason to want just one brief glimpse at who she is underneath.
If you're so unhappy,
Thank you.
not too late to switch
29.
to the side and become an informant.
12 more months until the existential crisis. I can't wait.
know anything they'd want, and they wouldn't have any use for me there.
So you lack confidence in your own abilities.
Miss Magilou has let me come with her wherever she went, and her talents have gotten us this far. But now that we have to fight Innominat, I'm worried. I don't know what use I can be for her, or if I can keep her safe.
But you'll still go, won't you?
Yeah, of course. Or else my name isn't Norman Brave.
See, you can do this. You've been keeping Magilou safe this whole time. With all the emotional pain she's been through, she's needed someone as thick-skinned and tenacious as you. She may talk like she doesn't care, but she wouldn't have tracked you down and renewed your pact if she didn't.
When you put it like that, bien! All right, you've convinced me.
That's right. You just trust in old Norman therapist's good advice. It won't steer you wrong.
Wow, I'd have never expected you to actually make a joke like that, Grimoire.
I just thought I'd get caught up in the moment like you wanted.
Grimoire is low-key one of my favorite supporting characters in Berseria. Maybe not low-key, I think that's pretty high-key. I've been a fan of her the whole time. Well, I guess we're premature for the hot spring scenes, but it was nice to know that Bienfu got a resolution scene of his own all along. Just tucked neatly away under the rug so that you have to make a point of looking for it, which seems true to Bienfu's role in the story. We might as well warp to Helives, so we can make a little more headway before we wrap things. Well, Grail, you'll appreciate this, because Pottery was on the stream right after my birthday, and he reminded me, because I had Regal pegged as an old man to whom I could relate in my head, but I wasn't sure, I didn't have on hand what his official age was in Tales of Symphonia. And according to Pottery, whom I have no reason to doubt, he's 33 during the events of the game. So at least when I turn 30, there are still some role models and people from the JRPGs I know who are ahead of me in years. So I can feel young by some yardstick that matters to me. But yes, I do know what you mean. Put it back! Put it back! Jesus Christ! Put that thing the fuck back! No! A large-scale version is said to have been located in a floating city. Yeah, fucking understatement of the year right there. Oh no! Oh no! At least it's only a statue. This was, so you might remember I was having anxiety when I first learned that the Eye of Atimony was something you could find here, about whether the items we were finding were the real bona fide objects from the other worlds or just nearby adjacent replicas and gestures at them. And it seemed like we were in good shape because the other ones did seem to be just like vague gestures as opposed to the real thing. And thank God this is just a statue. We can be happy looking at it and remembering the great times we had in Tales of Destiny, and we don't have to worry about the complete subjugation and annihilation of all life on the Earth's surface. So, sometimes things work out. Oh, God, I love that. Worth the trip. Worth all the trips in this expedition just for that moment.
Scout ship departing.
Yeah, it's funny. I'd kind of pegged him as Old Man Regal, but when Pottery said 33, it kind of made sense in my head in an intuitive way I hadn't quite expected, because Presea is 28 during the events of the game, even though time stops for her. And it makes sense to me even based on their relationship that, yeah, emotionally stunted girl who's 5 years younger than this guy with a lot more life experience who's, had this relationship with her sister, like the age differential fit with their relationship as I'd understood it, which I feel like is usually how I feel about the ages of Tales characters once I learn what they are. Like it fits more or less with my intuitions of the game. I was saying the age conversation came up on the stream when you weren't here because in the Tales of Arise art book, they also give the characters official ages, which I also hadn't realized. And learning that on one end of the spectrum, Rinwell is 14, which is younger than I thought, and Dohalim is 28, which is older than I thought. Like, it was actually unexpectedly illuminating and explanatory for me in terms of their characters, because I thought back to a lot of times when I felt like Rinwell was being myopic or inappropriate or selfish. And well, if she's just 14, like think of what we were just saying about 13-year-olds. She's just a kid, right? So of course she's immature. It's because she hasn't matured yet. And same thing with Dohalim. A lot of the times when I felt like, oh, he was being this, distanced, holier than thou jackass. Like, well, he's also a guy who's kind of been forced to go out and understand the world and live more years and have experience. And now he's traveling with a group whose motives he believes in, but a group which also features 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds, like people who are well his junior. How's a brother supposed to relate to that? So I know the age of Tales characters can reveal a lot of dimensions in the game that you don't always expect.
You there, Exorcist! Do you know what happened to the Praetor, Lady Teresa? She used to be in charge here.
Is she 16? That sounds young to me.
Only one who can restore law and
But I don't know the answer to that one off the top of my
Send a
head.
message to the Abbey. Tell them that the citizens of Helives are awaiting her return. Even if the
This is what I'm saying though. It's hard for me to just like get an intuitive sense from the games all the time, which is frustrating when there's always like a fact of the matter answer to it. They just don't always explicate it in the game in so many words.
Save me. Her and that ice cold glare of hers.
Teresa won't be coming back.
What?
If you really love Teresa, you shouldn't rely on her to protect you. You should become strong enough to protect her.
Whoa, that burning glare of yours. I think I like it.
Jesus Christ. And that's the true, unadulterated story of how a Teresa simp became an Eleanor simp. Oh, no, I'm sorry, a double simp. And see, that alone gives me a little itch to replay Tales of the Abyss, because I find myself thinking, okay, if I really hold in my head that Tyr is supposed to be 16 years old, how would that change my understanding of her character? Probably off the top of my head, which I guess is not a surprise, especially for someone like Tyr growing up with Van and everything that they endured as a family. She would strike me as remarkably mature for her age, which was probably why it was hard for me to wrap my head around the idea of her being 16 in the first place.
Now the whole town's been captured by demons. What is the Abbey doing? Why don't exorcists come around here anymore?
Yeah, I knew Van was 27.
Has abandoned us. If the calamity shows up here,
Luke, eventually the most mature 7-year-old you've ever
give
met.
up and drown ourselves in drink. If only Lady Teresa were still here.
Why has it come to this? Curse you, Lord of Calamity, for everything you've done!
You're quite the popular girl. Why not wave to your fans?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It is interesting to think about the plurality of different bar scenes that you get in these games too. Like, sometimes they're just meeting places or like communal grounds, like an agora almost. Like I'm thinking of Dawngrest and Vesperia, and sometimes like earlier on in Berseria. But then sometimes there are these nihilistic, alcoholic, escapist dens like we're seeing now, where people don't know how to cope with all the change that's happening in the world. And you get a lot of that in Destiny as well. It's not one of the major tropes in the games, but I remember, especially when all the drinking started earlier in Tales of Berseria, we chatted about it a little bit, and I think it definitely comes up in more places than some people think. All right, I'm going to say we'll wrap up the optional conversations here, and then as we're wrapping on stream time, this will be, I think, as natural a point to break as we're going to get as we rocket onward to the finale here.
planning evacuation routes. We need to be ready if the Calamity or demons show up in town.
When the Calamity attacked the first time, there was massive confusion. Some children got hurt in all the madness. We're preparing evacuation boats, so that we can all flee out to the sea if anything happens.
It's a good idea, but it will be hard to evacuate the entire town by boat. You'd best prepare a land route, too.
That's a good point. But wouldn't a land route run the risk of being attacked by demons?
Yes. You'll need to guard it as heavily as you do the city gates. It would be best if you could devise a way to prevent demons from intercepting the escape route, but...
Some of the exorcists lost use of their malachim. We can't count on the Abbey's garrison to help us.
I'll send a request for aid to the Abbey. But please, don't give up. Try to think of something.
Of course. There's no way we'll give up. You can't rely on someone else to protect you.
Can you really ask the Abbey for help? I can send a Sylph to some of my old friends from when I was still in training. Even if they refuse to trust a traitor like me, they won't ignore the plight of the people here in Helivis.
It's interesting the way some of these scenes are focusing on the various communities finding their sense of self-reliance and figuring out what they want to do in the world, because that's such a big part of the final acts and resolutions of some Tales games. Like, again, I mean, that's part of what I'm living in right now for Vesperia and Tales of Destiny. Like, a big part of that is bringing basically the whole world together to agree around what it is that the protagonists want to do. This doesn't strike me as the kind of game that's as inclined to do that, but seeing that you still get a flavor of that in some of the optional conversations is interesting. Oh, that's awesome, Grail. I'm so glad you're able to make time for that. And again, I think camping is such a great way to put yourself in a headspace for that. Oh no. A black hole of a spider web, though. That doesn't sound good. What's got you tied up?
Hey, how long are you going to sit there crying? You can't be a fisherman if you're afraid of some Lord of Calamity.
The demons that wrecked this town are still alive. Who knows when they'll show up again?
How about right now?
Sniveling idiot! Keep whining like that, and this Calamity whatever will keep walking all over you!
But what can we do? We can't even defeat a single demon.
That's why we take our boats, catch some fish, and make sure we've got enough food to keep on surviving. Didn't they drill anything into that fool head of yours in school? Do I have to knock some sense into you? Get up and get the boat ready.
That is one hot-headed dad.
Too hot for any demons to get near, that's for sure.
Nice to see these recurring portraits of the same relationships, like this son who came back from the capital to learn the fishing trade from his father. We ran into him on the way out to Kilras as well. Yeah. These games do all provide such great models for different character relationships. I imagine that would be useful for doing your own character work. Although I can see what you're saying, they also provide such different perspectives on characters that if you're gravitating towards more than one of them at the same time, I can see how that would be like wildly confusing.
Welcome back! I take it you defeated the
Oh, I was trying to go to the exclamation point on the map.
But that still leaves Innominat and the Shepherd.
Onward ho to the last battle! Oh, I picked up something nice for you. Here.
It's the Eye of Adamony. Thank God.
An apple?
That's much more
It's a
symbolic
fortune
and less
apple.
threatening.
A good luck charm. No real powers, but they're hard to find. Legend has it, they're pretty lucky.
A fortune apple.
But we're the bad guys, aren't we? Maybe what we need is bad luck instead.
I think the Reaper's got that covered.
Aw, that's just mean.
Well, I appreciate the thought. Thanks, Benwick. I love apples.
Just don't eat it.
I couldn't eat it, even if I wanted. Wait a moment. That's right. My power to consume is a part of Innominat. If that's true, then...
What is it?
You want a bite? Delicious fortune apple.
No way. That's a good luck charm.
That it is. One to give you the courage you need to survive.
So, where's our final destination?
The Empyrean's throne.
Sail for Port Sexton.
Aye, aye, ma'am. Aye, aye, sir.
Just don't eat him. Got it?
I won't. Don't worry.
Well, there you go. I mean, that sounds like progress, Grail. It's as we always say with this work, you know, whether you're writing a story or doing an analysis, it's a slow grind and an adventure. What matters is putting in the thought and just, you oftentimes, as with the camping, discover things when you least expect it. Pink Moon Neko, hey! Good to see you, my friend. Grail, Pink Moon Neko is the master lurker. If you don't know that by now, you haven't been paying attention. Although we did have a good chat on Friday when you were AFK camping.
For others, but I think it's happening.
What do you think of traveling around to see for ourselves? I'd like to know what's going on out there.
I'd like to meet the elemental Empyreans, if I could.
That's not a great idea. They're all in various Earth Pulse points, but where those are is a mystery. They could be very far off.
And they might not view us as allies.
Yep, gods live by their own rules. Our business with Innominat probably doesn't concern them.
You're right.
It might be wise to scope out the situation before our battle. As we go around, we might find out more about what Artorias is up to.
So now, do we remember this? I might have to go back into the stream or maybe the wiki to check, because I think, you know, the way they're talking about the different places in which the Empyreans settle, I think the background lore we get in Zestiria is the trials of the shepherd all happen in places that were built basically as old temples to the Empyreans, but the Empyreans are no longer there at that point, I think. Or I might be misremembering things. It might be that one of the ruins that we found earlier in this game in Berseria was a temple that was enacted back when the Empyreans were last active, and then it had fallen into dormancy because Empyrean worship had fallen into dormancy. But maybe that was also meant to be one of the same places as the trials.
Hey, Rokurou! I heard about a Class 4 island that sounds damn near perfect for you.
We're going to have a lot of side content, my friendos.
Do the rivers flow with good drink?
My
I'll
man.
let you mention it. But no, different island. I'm talking about you as a swordsman. The demons there all run around the island in suits of armor and helmets and stuff, I hear.
Armored demons are not.
Yeah, I think they do talk about it there, Grail. That sounds right to me.
Was that all the exorcists who got sent there came
The one
back
just
with
up the
their
bend from
swords
Lady Lake.
broken. I don't know if they've got swords too, or if their armor is just that strong. But I reckon your sword will be able to stand up to them.
Well then, I've heard worse ideas.
If you believe the tales, that island used to be a place where swordsmen and knights competed to see who was stronger.
Oh yeah, I know the island you're talking about. Craftsmen from all over gave their finest weapons and armor to the greatest of warriors and made them fight. It was as much a showcase for those wares as it was a contest of strength.
So the demons on that island might come at us wielding fine arms and armor.
I'm certainly up for checking it out. I'm curious to see how good the stuff really is.
After all I've told you, you still want to go? What is wrong with you?
It's simple, sailor. We're nuts. And I think that's the best button I can put on this stream of this particular game at this particular moment. All right, we played a bit past the hour, but I think it was worth it to wrap up Helavis. I think we're going to have a bunch of fun side content to explore too, and a fun climax to the story ahead. We're getting into the end game in more ways than one, which is always a fun sequence of streams for the Tales games and for the way in which we read them on Tales of Praxis. So, wow, talk about a great stream. Grail, great to have your presence back, my friend. And oh my goodness, the payoff in this third act. I feel like payoff is the word I keep coming back to, but those two battles and all of the insights into the characters around them with Shigure and Melchior, just huge. What a great centerpiece adventure. And I think with that sort of confrontation of ideals versus praxis theory versus praxis, you might say, in terms of the Abbey versus the party happening on this literally explosive set piece of a volcano that could erupt at every moment, but that requires the impetus of the party in order to actually re-engage the Empyreans. A perfect little symbol, like all the other symbols that we've talked about in Tales of Berseria, for so many of the key touch points of the plot and its themes and what it is that it's trying to say at the end of the day. What's the button going to be on it? Where's the story going to come to a head? We're going to find out sooner rather than later. And I'm really excited, not just for that, but for the little tidbits we can unearth about characters as we take some time to wander through the world too. But I have to imagine, with how dialed in we are to the story now, we'll probably start with an adventure to the Empyrean's throne and that delightfully threatening, somehow familiar thing in the sky before a number of side adventures. So we'll have plenty. Yeah, we missed you, Grail, but it's a pleasure to have you back, and I'm so glad that you had a great camping trip, and one which, unsurprisingly, we were able to weave into the fabric of everything that we do here at Tales of Praxis. So that's the beauty of a real-life JRPG party, right? It is, it's all connected at the end of the day. Yeah, fair enough, Grail. I will, on that last point of Grail's, not to pass the buck, but I will put it to the real-life JRPG party. As we're getting excited to devour, pun intended, the end of Berseria, we do need to think about what game we will be playing next on the stream for the live book club portion of the Tales of Praxis series. Basically, everything's a good suggestion except for Symphonia and Dawn of the New World and Zestiria, because those are the ones we've played through and thought through on the stream already. But everything else is fair game. We've had a bunch of conversations about a number of different possibilities, everything ranging from Graces to Xillia to Legendia to Abyss to Vesperia to Destiny to some esoteric double headers. What else do I have on my shelf over there? We have Eternia also. I would say Hearts, but I'm not confident I can figure out how to rig up a Vita to the stream. But if we were really passionate about that, I could try to figure it out at least. So many options. I will spend some time thinking, but I do think it's fun, especially now that we're done with a couple of duologies, to look to the group in terms of whether there's one that we're really interested in working through together. If not, I can always deliberate and come up with one that's well-reasoned from my perspective, but JRPGs are a party enterprise, and so too can the stream be. So we will think on it. All right, Pink Moon Neko, Xillia, your official vote is hereby cataloged. So thank you for speaking up. I appreciate that, my friend. The thing to think about, and this is not something to detract from, picking Xillia, given how we've been playing the stream and going through duologies, we would almost certainly commit ourselves to doing Xillia and then Xillia 2, both as part of the stream, just since that's the natural order in which we've been engaging these things, which, again, is not a point against Xillia. I think that's just the right way to think about it if we decide to do Xillia. Yeah, that might be a useful way to... why would we not just play them all on the stream at the same time? We'll just do a massive, quantum superposition of playthroughs. I'm sure there's some way of thinking about the series that would make that make sense. Well, probably in terms of Chronos with a CH and everything that we see in the EX dungeon in Tales of Arise, right? Arise is one that's also on the table, especially since its DLC is coming out in November. So plenty of different avenues to take with it. Grail, I might take your advice. I can spin up a poll and share it with people on the site's social too. But yes, I will keep everyone posted, and definitely, to Grail's point, disseminate what the next choice is, ideally sooner rather than later, so we can know what we're rolling into next. But let that not detract from the work we have left to do with Berseria, because like we were talking about earlier this stream, it's so easy to focus on and look to the next thing. This is Payoff with a capital P. There's going to be so many great things to unearth and think about and use to recontextualize everything we've been through on what is definitely the longest of our streamed playthroughs so far here in Berseria. So a lot to think about, not just in terms of wrestling with the characters and what this game is trying to say, but remember, also a big part of why we wanted to play this one with Zestiria, also what it's saying in conversation with Zestiria. So plenty of good conversations again. Another great game of one Tales variety or another after that. I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes, my friends. Thank you for kicking off your Monday evening here at Tales of Praxis. I'm Aaron Suduko, the founder of With a Terrible Fate. Be here or be square, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, and we will dive back in to the conclusion of Tales of Berseria and everything that follows thereafter. Till then, my friends, think well, game well, cheers.